We're ready.
Let's roll.
You are live.
Thank you very much. I will go ahead and share the agenda. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Commission's virtual public meeting for Thursday, January 20th, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sale,
Here.
Mr. Waldman,
Here.
Ms. Butler. She's muted, but I see her here.
Oh,
Mr.
here, sorry, I'm muted.
Mr. Pline,
Present.
Mr. Imes.
Here. Okay, we have quorum. We have all commissioners present. In the last meeting, Ms. Butler was absent, and she's here tonight to continue. Were you able to look at some of the information from last meeting? I'm sure.
Yes, I reviewed I reviewed the entire meeting and I think all the documentation.
A lot.
It was a lot.
It is a lot. I'm sure you can continue to review some more too. My goodness. Okay, what we have in front of us is the agenda displayed for this evening. There's quite a bit of stuff on there. A lot of it, some of it may be high in the sky for us getting to it, obviously. And what I don't want to have happen is have people who are applicants with a lot of people online billing to them, whatnot, and waiting all night and never getting to them. So let's look at this as a commission for this agenda before we approve it, and with reality attached. And some of this, a little bit of it, we won't have to worry about. So starting with item number 1, Jackie had noted that there was a delay in the capital budget and capital improvement program. I'm sorry, not that item. The report we were supposed to get for the Planning Commission. The draft annual report, I'm sorry, it's all the way at the bottom for new business. The draft annual report is not completed yet, and but it does have a time limitation on it, which is going to affect us. So we'll be getting that via email when the department finishes it, and we'll be reviewing it for comments then. But this is more or less an administrative item that we have to handle for every year. So if there's anyone has an issues, Commissioner, for approving that via email approval later on, and the annual report will be posted online for the public as well. But we don't have it yet, and we're hoping to get it sometime early next week. And Jackie, if you're online, any comments?
I'm working. I'm up to August right now. It's actually, I just moved to September, and I'm going to email it to you either tonight or tomorrow morning. Please send me your edits, and then I can resend it on Monday with the edits if I get them.
What's the due date that you need that for?
I think it's the 27th. They need it by the 27th. I apologize. I was late. I'm late getting it done, and time just got away from me. So
No worries. There's a lot going on, especially with other projects and things.
yeah,
How many
I've been
meetings do we
pretty
have?
overwhelmed. So, but the sooner that you could look at it and provide me with your edits, the better that would be. I realize it's an imposition on you all, but it would be greatly appreciated.
Okay. Any problems with that, commissioners?
No.
Excellent. And I believe we had 21 meetings in 2021. Oh, the irony. All right, so that item
21
on,
meetings and 20,000 items.
it seems like. All right, so that item F will be taken off the agenda for future handling offline in the in-between business meetings. Other than that, we have, starting at item number 1, the capital budget and capital improvement program for electric mobility. This is a public hearing continued from January 6th. Shouldn't be too much to do with that. We can knock that out. Then the plan development for preliminary application for the National Lutheran Communities. We've been going through that for the last couple of meetings, and that should be well known to everyone in the room and the public. That is the big one in that is going to take up the majority of the meeting. I don't know if we're going to be able to complete all the public comment and everything and debate by the end of this meeting to then get to the follow-on items. So therein lies the concern. We can get through 1 and 2. Then we look at number 3 and 4, site design review for Primrose School, and then the major site design for subdivision application, also known as Bay Village Suites. So Tom, do you have any comments with regard to the timing and getting on and why these, and what do you think? Because I don't want to have people sitting around all night long if we're not going to get to them, or what else could we do to accommodate them for a few short minutes if they need to tonight?
Chairman, I think your concerns are valid. Item 3 is a continuation from December. If you recall, we've had
Yes.
a number of continuations on the Primrose School, and down to sort of one last item of concern. The commission was interested in the access and how we could perhaps rework the street concept to limit the amount of U-turns. And I think we have come to, after a number of meetings with the Department of Public Works and the applicant's traffic consultant, a really good concept plan that's a win-win. But it will probably need 20 to 30 minutes for that item. Item 4 is a complete major subdivision and preliminary plat. That will need probably 2 hours at least for that.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get to 4 by my average assessment here at all.
I would appreciate if we don't do like we did with the Providence Point, we don't do in piecemeal and just ask for people's comments before the presentation is done by the applicant. I don't want to do, if we're not gonna have time for the public tonight, I'd rather not have them wait around and do it before the presentation is actually over. I don't like doing the public hearing in parts in between.
I agree with Mr. Iams. Also, I don't think that Primrose School can be done in 20 to 30 minutes.
Neither do I.
So it's nice that they're on the agenda, but our ability to get to them is close to 0.
Correct. So item 3 and 4, I don't see us getting to tonight, and to keep them online from the 2.5 hours, 3 hours to not get to them would be a disservice. But with that said, Primrose has been one of the earlier items we've been reviewing since late last year. So we do need to give them adequate priority. And since that's going to take a nice talk through, how about we prioritize them as the first item at the next meeting? It's 2 weeks, allows us to give them the priority at the next meeting. Because I think
we finish with Providence Point.
Well, we may not. Even if we don't, I would still like to give them, because they were in prior to Providence Point. So looking from timing, and they came back, either way, I think we could finish both by the next meeting. That's for sure.
Okay, so for the February 16th meeting, we will have the Primrose as item 1, and then we will have Providence Point as item 2, and then item 3 would be Bay Village.
Yeah,
Is that
you would
correct?
start that. Yep, because you could get into the briefs for item 4. You could definitely start that.
Well,
And are
I
you
have
voting
a
to
suggestion.
Go ahead, Alex.
Can I just ask
Given-
one more question? Are you all voting to continue items 3 and 4 to the next meeting?
Not
So
yet.
that,
Why don't you hold off on that for a second?
Okay,
Given that we're going to have probably Providence Point on the next meeting, just to finish it out, I might suggest that we move number 3 up ahead of Providence Point, finish that off, then
Today?
spend the rest of the time on Providence Point,
Disagree.
and realizing we're going to have to finish that off in the next meeting. That way, the Primrose project has been on for a long time, and I think it would be good to get that finished up tonight if we could.
May I disagree, Mr. Pline?
Sure.
I'd like to focus, concentrate on, and get as far as we possibly can with Providence Point. I mean, there's a potential, because there's very little public comment, there's a potential for actually finishing it tonight. And I think that we're going to get into a lot of discussion on Primrose. And I think that it's fair to continue them to the February 3rd meeting.
I
And then
agree
they don't
with
have
you.
to read, and Bay Woods or Bay Village, they don't have to re-advertise. But you know,
I agree with that. I think
we've
that's,
got
I think
all
that's
of the
prudent.
team here for Providence Point. You know, they're ready to roll. I don't see any advantage. I mean,
Well, I agree with you, Bob, but a couple of things that kind of bother me was, this one, first of all, we're giving priority to Providence Point over Primrose, of course. But I understand what you're saying there. But the whole problem with Providence Point is, that was kind of rolled out during the holidays, over the holidays, and then finally people are actually coming up now. So I don't think everybody is aware of what's actually going on with Providence Point, and it's already on the agenda for next month anyways. I mean, next 2 weeks anyways. It's going to be extended enough. It's not like we're voting on it tonight. Even if we went through it all tonight, there's no way we could vote on it tonight.
why not?
Because it's already says it's open to, well, because they haven't even finished the developer's presentation yet.
That's correct. That's very correct, Dave.
And I wouldn't do it at the same time if they haven't even finished the developer's presentation yet, because something might come up and they say, oh, I want to come back next week. So I certainly would not vote on Providence Point, and I have no intention of doing so.
You can't. The presentation's not been completed, so the public has not been made aware and had their chance to go off and then
Right.
comment.
So that gets back to my suggestion. If we know we've got Providence Point on the next meeting, let's try to get the Primrose thing completed. I've looked at the material, and I don't think it's going to take as long as maybe Bob thinks, but let's find out.
I'm for keeping the flow as it is and removing item number 4. So that would mean we look at Providence Point first and then get to Primrose as we can later in the day. But we know that we're going to have to vote on Providence Point the next meeting or after. It can't be tonight. So we might actually be able to stop debate and whatnot on Providence Point at a certain time as to make enough time for Primrose to have an adequate time frame. So I would say by
last meeting, the thought was about an hour and a half to maybe 2 hours to finish off the presentations on Providence Point. I think we all agree number 4 we should strike from the agenda.
Yep.
But if we move number 3
Agree.
in front of Providence Point, even if we spent an hour on it, then spent 2 hours finishing up the presentations on Providence Point, then we have we basically have almost the entire next meeting to really go through our deliberations on Providence Point and hear any public comment based on the rest of the presentations, and then do our deliberations next meeting. That's my thought.
Well, that is if we don't think Primrose needs to at least have a 2-week public comment frame, which they may not need.
Well,
I
I
could
think
go with
we've gotten a
Primrose
bunch of comments. We've gotten a bunch of comments already, so people clearly are paying attention.
Yeah. Being that it's on the agenda as item number 3 already, do we already have the people who would comment online for Primrose now? Or if we started now, would we be hosing those people that are thinking that it's going to be later on in the meeting today?
You have a fair number of people for Primrose already in.
Do we have all of them?
Stand by.
And it's not like they're told to wait till later. They know they just have to attend the meeting. So kind of leaning towards you now, Alex, because of timing and the way that the night works. You don't know what's going to take longer. You take the shorter one first and the longer one second.
I'm also curious how many people we have online to talk about Providence Point.
Mr. Chair, we have all but one for Providence Point, for Primrose.
Do we have the adequate Primrose staff, or is there staff for them and the applicant? Are they ready? That's the other item. Why don't you ask their lead representative if they're going to be ready for that, or would they rather go later? That's the last question I ask before we make this agenda change.
Stand by. Okay. Can I just promote them so that you can talk directly with them?
Yes, the
That's the
lead.
easiest thing.
And technically, they were in the basket well before, because we started them back in December, November timeframe.
Mr. Chairman, you did receive my email from Mr. Dales, who did actually request to be moved up on the agenda. So
I saw that email, but did not open it and read it. I was driving and unable to another meeting.
I would think that Mr. Dales is prepared
Okay.
to present currently.
All right. Well, that sounds enough for me from Tom. All right, commissioners, I'll make a motion that we strike number 4, item F as well, to be voted on a later time, and then item number 3, Primrose, be elevated before item 2.
I'll second that.
And Mr. Savage, you raised your hand. Did you have something very important to say there that would help influence this?
Well, I just want to, I feel obligated to make it known, since it's in my ward, that I know the applicant for number 4 Bay Village is getting very impatient with the entire process. It just turns to their length of time they've been in the process. So
Okay.
I just feel obligated to relay that. I was here just to provide public testimony on that. I'm happy to come back, but I just feel obligated to make that known.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alderman Savage.
I would suggest that if we're gonna admit that we're not gonna get to number 4 Bay Village, that we continue it so that they don't need to re-advertise.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. So we have a motion with, and I'll state it again, to move item number 3 before item number 2, continue item number 4 to the next meeting, and the draft annual report to be taken care of, and an administrative role on the side when the report actually gets completed.
I will second that.
Any more discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any
Opposed.
abstentions? Okay, one opposition for Bob. Rest of the gang is in approval. So we modified the agenda as such. So everyone out there, the Primrose School.
Mr. Chair, I'm attempting to promote them and they're not moving. So they've got to click on the button. They may not
We
be.
still have an item before them, so we got,
Okay.
so no worries. But yeah, oh yeah, tell them, sorry, you're doing administrative stuff. My apologies.
And just to be clear, on our agenda, it did say right clear this day, the public hearing for Providence Point will be open until February 3rd. So we couldn't vote on it today.
Correct. You can't when they're not even finished their basic presentations. So, okay. So the agenda has been modified and approved as is, with those changes noted. Sorry, not as is, but with those changes noted. So in that light, let's go on to the next item, which is the approval of minutes, the January 6th draft, which is pretty simple, sent out in a Word document that hopefully all have gotten. Is there any changes to the minutes that anyone wants to make note of?
Bob had an addition of a paragraph, and I don't know if everybody has had a chance to look at those. Kim sent them around.
Saw that email.
Yep, I would move that we adopt as amended.
I'll second.
Do I need to display that for anyone? Did anyone not get to see that from Bob this morning? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the minutes as amended by Bob, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Minutes are approved as amended. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone else. Moving down the agenda line, we have the first public hearing, which is a continued public hearing from January 6th. The capital budget, capital improvement program, a 100% electric mobility plan. So can we get those people promoted to talk, and hopefully we can finalize this issue? And first, staff, anything to add to this item before the applicants or anyone else state anything further? Sorry, city staff. Nothing from the planning and zoning department, I wouldn't presume. It's a pretty easy item. Okay, anything else from the supporters of ZTA 2021-015, the ordinance 04021? Do we have anyone to talk from that? I saw the city attorney here, but I don't know what he's
I
here.
believe, Ben, that project was previously presented
was.
by the administration at
That's
the
correct.
prior meeting.
That's correct. But we always give them another chance. We give staff
Right.
and them as well on the second meeting to make another statement if they need to or any changes. Okay, being that I'm hearing none from staff or anyone else who supported the 04021, let's go into our public comment from that. Do we have anybody to comment publicly on that item in addition to what we had from the last meeting? Julian, are you busy?
No, I'm sorry. I just missed that. Public comment on which item?
The first item number 1.
No, I don't have
Anybody here to
anyone
talk tonight?
I don't have anyone here on public comment, but there are a number of staff people that I promoted a while ago.
Right. And they didn't make any comment, I don't believe. So if they need to make comment, they can chime in if it was a IT issue, but we'll go on to the commissioners. We had this item last time. It was about the ferry boat and the landings downtown Spa Creek using electric propulsion. Any debate amongst the commissioners on this item? And it's paid for with grants, mind you, which is a lovely thing. Hopefully that holds true throughout the entire lifespan of it.
Hey, Ben, this is Diane. I actually didn't get a chance to comment, obviously, because I wasn't there, but I did listen to the presentation. And if you don't mind, if I could just run through my comments quickly.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, I really like the mayor's idea of creating this, potentially transformative project to take advantage of this moment in time when federal dollars are likely to flow to jurisdictions that have shovel-ready projects. And so that's pretty exciting. I especially like the fact that creating green infrastructure will help us achieve, many of the goals that we have around sustainable growth. I love the 10-minute trolley, the Eastport Ferry, and e-cruiser like circulators. I think it's really forward-thinking, and let's face it, in the case of the ferry, definitely fun. I really agree with the use of the term asset, which the mayor used to talk about our garage parking. And I wholeheartedly agree that if it's correctly managed, our parking assets can really help get people out of their cars and reduce our traffic problems. So that whole discussion around getting them out of their cars before they get downtown into the traffic jam was particularly appealing to me. And I also commend my colleagues who took the time to read the Eastport Business Association's 2018 parking report. There were 2 lengthy reports that preceded it by Sabra, S-A-B-R-A, Wang and Associates, which is a firm the city hired in 2016. The first one was a 63-page existing conditions study and report dated February 18th, 2016. And the second is a short-term and long-term recommendation report dated September 2016. I just need to point out that of all the recommendations of the professional consultants that the city hired and paid to make recommendations, and the 13 recommendations made by the business group that studied these reports from Eastport and did some additional fact gathering 3 years ago, I only see, I may be wrong, I only see one recommendation that has come into being, which is putting a public parking sign to designate Annapolis City Marina as a public lot. So I just need to comment on the letter that the Civic Association presented, which represents, as you know, Civic Association represents over 1,000 people in Eastport. And it states, and I'm quoting their letter, the data and recommendation contained in the 2018 Eastport report, which was attached, are valid and should be first and now applied before any parking impact of 04021 and the renovation of the Hillman Garage. And as cited in the executive summary of that report, the time is overdue for parking in Eastport to receive the attention that its location, residents, and business and tax dollars deserve. So I just want to point out that since that report was done 3 years ago, there have been a couple of major changes, I would say, in this little peninsula that I live on. One of them is Forward Brewing, and the other one is Amazon delivery trucks. And I have to confess to love living a block away from Forward Brewing. I try not to take or order Amazon products and have delivery trucks come to my house, but there have been a couple times when that's happened. True confessions. But I just need to say that the impact on 4th Street, the impact of Amazon trucks essentially stopping and different trucks that are beer trucks and food delivery trucks that stop at the Boatyard, O'Leary's, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, Davis's, Forward Brewing, really makes getting around this peninsula particularly challenging, especially from May through December. And these prior reports, 3 years old now, don't even reflect these other changes that that I've just mentioned. And to add to all of that, I have to say that BG&E just started to replace our gas lines on the peninsula. From 1st Street to 6th Street, they are tearing up the roads and running new connections to each house to connect the new gas lines. On top of that, they're going to replace the water main between 1st Street and 6th Street. And they're going to do the same process, connecting each house at a time, followed by the city working with BG&E to do a complete street replacement for our sidewalks. And Eastport is seeking to bury all electric utilities at the same time because of the cost savings to do it while this other work is taking place over the next 2 or 3 years. So in the best case scenario, all of this stuff, all the gas and water lines would be done and the electric utilities buried before the electric ferry is up and running. Otherwise, I see an already bad transportation and parking issue being exacerbated. The good news is that the Civic Association has formed a task force to work with the city on these issues and to hopefully help bring some of the exciting new ideas about increasing our multimodal and electric transportation to fruition. The benefits will be significant and long lasting. So I'd like to thank David Jarrell, our interim P&Z director, Mike Malinoff, and the mayor for taking part in the task force and understanding the long-term benefits of working with Eastport. So that's really all I have to say. The mayor famously said, actually 4 years ago, almost to the day at our Civic Association meeting, he doesn't want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg in Eastport. And I believe he means that. And I think the well-intentioned task force meeting with the city, hopefully will help us get over some of these hurdles. So those are my comments.
All very good comments, and thank you for the update on what's going on in Eastport. I'm sure we all need to make awareness of that.
Yeah, it was kind of glossed over last time, and everyone was so excited about talking about how exciting things were that I think that just got lost in the shuffle. So thanks for letting me just sort of expound on that a little bit.
Definitely needed. I'll make some comments. The boat being a pricey item but not paid for us is also very limited in its capacity. I recommended to the mayor's staff, if you can have a ferry like that, I'd love to see it a little bigger. So whatever we could do to make it bigger. The boat is fantastic. It's elevated perfectly for the existing docks we have, which are kind of low to the water. But I would think more than 6 to 8 people per trip might be needed in the heat of the season, especially if you're only doing 3 to 4 trips an hour. So I would love to see that plussed up, but it is what it is. And it's a grant process, so we don't have to pay for it. Continued operation in the future should also be grant supposedly, but who knows how to pan out, but you got to try these things. I don't think that should limit us from going after it. So I'm in support of these electric moves, and it helps get people around downtown and a lot better over to Eastport and brings Eastport in the fold a little bit more rather than being separated by just the bridge. And it adds a fun element. So I think it's going to be well received. I just don't want the price to get out of control for the city. But you know what? These things do take a little bit of city money eventually. And I think I'm still in support. So anyone else, comments?
Sure. I very much like the idea of the electric, the vehicles and the 10-minute trolley and those circulating wider than downtown over to Eastport and to try to deal with all the things the mayor talked about. The one thing that I just really have a problem with is the ferry, and I know grant money is talked about, but free money is never free. You still have to maintain it, you have to dock it, you have to have an operator, who knows if that's going to be free? You have, all of these things around operating something like that. It won't be free. As much as we'd all like to believe that. And grant money, typically, these are, if we even can get it, and I'm not that sanguine about our ability to get that. I think the whole country is thinking of this infrastructure bill as being some huge windfall, and not everybody is going to get what they want. So I'm a little skeptical there, just is in my nature. But I think it's this. While this would be fun, and it essentially would be, I think it would cater more to visitors than anything else. Honestly, I think it's not something we can afford, and any money we're likely to spend on the ferry, I would rather see going into our existing transit system. If anybody read the Transportation Board's recommendation to go to fare-free transit, I'd rather see the money go to that. Any city money go to that, because that serves, very much an underserved part of our community, and I think that's important and something that's never really talked about in these meetings, and I think that's a disservice to a part of our community. So I just can't support the ferry piece. The other parts I think make a lot of sense, and they should be wrapped up into a larger plan on how to deal with our transit system. But if this is an all or nothing thing with respect to the pieces, I can't really support it. If we can make a recommendation to not have the ferry piece, then I'm supportive of it.
I won't repeat what's been said. I want to focus in on this, the shuttle, the supposed 10-minute shuttles. I have my doubts about the abilities of people to do it. But this is a plan which is a moving target, so to speak. And I can only caution the city to keep an eye on that portion of it. And when you talk about, when Ben talks about a bigger ferry making more sense, I would point out that these little golf carts only carry 5 people. And so it looks like it may be an expensive way to move 5 people around. But in any case, the city is looking forward to trying to do things in flexible and new ways. And that's to be congratulated.
Bob, I just want to comment, if you've ever seen the circulator go around town, oftentimes it has like no more than 4 or 5 people. So, and they can't get on the side streets, which in a way will eliminate all the congestion downtown, having these small vehicles, electric vehicles, using these side streets to, stay out of the main arteries that get clogged.
I don't think they figured out how to schedule them or call for them or keep them filled. And the circulators under this plan is going to be used pretty much to just go from Park Place to City Hall, or in the vicinity of City Hall. That's my understanding of the plan. I agree with you. There's lots of times when those circulators are not filled with people.
Well, I don't think there really, frankly, is a detailed plan. That's another piece, but not part of this ordinance.
Right.
That's another
I
story.
have to say that
simply the capital budget, but I'm not sure if we're buying more of the shuttle, the golf cart size shuttles. I don't understand it, but in any case, I'm ready to vote.
I have to say that I'm more interested, and I feel better about the shuttles than any part of it, the 10-minute trolley, than I do about any other part of it. I understand what you're saying, Alex. You need some bang for your buck with this ferry, and I don't, 6 to 8 people, maybe we're not getting a bang for a buck, but it's fun. It might cause some parking issues in Eastport for people to take it over. Of course, I just walk across the bridge as a resident, but it would be a fun thing. But I think the golf cart thing is a really good thing, especially when it's coming from Calvert Street, a very, 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 very visible part of it. The biggest issue is if we're going to put a little bit of extra money into it, the money has to go into communicating and letting people understand how it works rather than anything else. I don't really care about an app finding your way. If it's there every 10 minutes, then it's pretty much, you can count on it and don't have to worry about the app as much as you would with the circulator, which was like every 30 minutes, I think, at its best, even though it was supposed to be a lot less. It was about 30 minutes at its best. So, you know, I'm much more of a fan of the golf carts. Right now, you know, they're around town, but you have no idea where they go, when they go, where to pick it up, what to do, how it works. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm hoping that that is all part of the communications plan for that AMRP is gonna do for Hillman Garage. I think I asked that question last time to the city manager, and I think that's how he answered that.
You know, I
I
got the
also
feel.
heard,
So
oh, sorry, I also heard that the Maritime Advisory Board has some serious concerns over the ferry and Coast Guard approval and issues with the boat. And I've not had a chance to watch that meeting, which is a public meeting, but I just wanted to mention that it would be good to understand what those issues are around, because that board has a lot of experienced maritime people, and Debbie Goslin, I know she just sold Watermark, but you know, I think if the city were going to do something like this, it would have to partner with an organization like that. And I think that was probably discussed, or I think I remember hearing that in the meeting, because the city doesn't really manage these private contracts very well. Remember the golf course? So I feel like having a third party requirement to whatever we do there with funding the ferry and using the ferry would be really important.
Yeah, we were kind of given a preamble to all this at the start of the presentation last meeting, and the fact is that it's kind of late to the game. There was a timing issue. In order to get the grant, you had to have approval of some type of plan, but yet they didn't have enough time to make a fantastic plan. So everything was kind of just, well, let's quickly just try to get something through. And I understand that. But when the money is told to me in the briefing and guaranteed that, you know, it's going to be grants, it's not going to be us initially, I don't have a big issue with going for it, you know. But and I could also take one look at the boat in the video and tell that it's clearly not ADA compliant, and you know, the life rafts, the life vests aren't clearly in the open for this and what have you yet. But they'll work that out in the future, one would think. But it's more of like didn't really look like much like a ferry to me. It looked more like a speedboat touring boat than it did a ferry. But hey, you know, if it's we don't have to pay for it and it's worth a shot, it may not be the one we eventually live with, but it might be a start. So I'm open to starting something like this, and as long as the bill is not high. And it doesn't seem like the bill is going to be much initially. But I do share your concerns, obviously, in the future. But you got to start somewhere and do something.
You just have to be prepared, though, because some people just like projects because they like toys. It's another toy to play with. And I totally agree with what Alex says about, you know, nothing's free, and it really isn't. Right. And you know, even from the outset, it's not free. So, and I had one other issue. I mean, it's like now we're
trying to
make it work.
Yeah, and we're trying to. The theme was trying to electrify downtown, right? And the other theme was connecting Eastport to Annapolis. And I get it, connecting Eastport to Annapolis with a ferry that makes people easily go over there. It's all. We are dealing with such short distances in Annapolis, and what the mayor said was true. We have a walking problem, not really a parking problem, getting people to get out and walk, because it's not that far. If you're downtown, you want to walk to Eastport. I mean, we could all lose a few calories and go do that. So are we really supporting something that really has a terrible need, or are we just going to clutter the roads and the pedestrian pathways with more golf carts trying to get by and more boats crossing Spot Creek when it really wasn't needed? I mean, I can see the ferry because you can cut across and not have to go all the way to the bridge. That makes a lot of sense to me.
And I can see the golf carts because it can bring into other parts of the city that are ignored, like a Maryland Avenue area, or even to West Annapolis to a degree. I don't know. It's
and I mean, a lot of it's unknown. I think we're dealing with something that's like, hey, please give us approval because we'll finalize and get a better plan later and try to apply this later. That's kind of that's really what the gist was for me. And I'm for it. So
I approve of the intentions of it. Yes.
Yeah. So it's supposedly, I asked, it's not going to cost us anything right now. So not much at all. So
And if that were the case, and I kind of agree with what Alex said, it probably won't be the case altogether. But, you know, assuming that the vast majority of that money does come from grant money, and assuming the parking task force can work something out with the city, you know, I think it's pretty promising, and I really commend the creativity and ingenuity that went into this, especially the 10-minute trolley and the circulators, because I do think it will be great to serve more of our existing residents in a more efficient way that gets people out of the cars earlier. And I also agree with Alex, what he was, you know, he mentioned about this the ferry would serve visitors and tourists more than benefit people with transportation issues in our city that are
Yes.
underserved. So I like those other aspects more than the ferry, but I do see, you know, the novelty of the ferry is potentially being beneficial to the city in terms of
I see
revenue. as well.
I see the ferry as transporting people to Eastport to spend money at the businesses over there and go to the restaurant. And
Yeah, but
people
you
in
know,
Eastport
along
to
those
go
lines,
downtown.
I
Vice
agree with
versa.
that, but we could use, you know, street end floating docks to do that too. Right now, people come into our town, especially around boat show, and they try to just get in their dinghy and come to Eastport, and we don't have one public fairway that has a floating dock for them to come and dine and drink in Eastport. And, you know, we've had money in the CIP for floating docks that we haven't gotten funded. I just think we got to be cautious about how we prioritize. So all the other aspects of this electric mobility plan seem more worthy than the ferry. But I'm not saying I don't want the ferry. I'm just saying parking has to be, those issues have to be worked out first. And I think that they can be. So.
Well,
Sure,
we're not-
I like to eat lobster every night too, but you know, that's not happening. So anyway, I'll leave it. I'll leave it with that quip.
Okay. So any more debate, or are we time for a motion from anyone? Okay, I'll start off with the
I'll move to
simplest,
approve
easiest
it.
motion. Okay, go ahead. Say it again, Bob.
I'll move to approve it.
As is. Okay. I'll second that motion. Any further debate?
Yeah, I would like to amend or add condition that the task force has to meet and come up with the parking solutions before the implementation of any ferry plan. So we can get started by, you know, maybe introducing and trying to get the grant money, but I think there's time for the task force in the next few months to meet and figure out how they're going to work this out. So I don't want to put the kibosh on it. I just want to make sure there's a condition that this is going to be taken seriously, the parking issue.
Are we moving to approve this, or are we moving to recommend that it be approved?
Yes, recommend.
We're moving.
Yeah,
to
we just
recommend
recommend this. Anyway.
Recommend. Yeah, I recommend it with the task force approval.
So you'd like to add on a condition that the task force meets and with the city and come up with a plan to accommodate the parking issues for the ferry and the golf carts or any other transportation devices, correct?
Yes,
good?
yes,
Alright.
and I think it could work. So I'm feeling very confident because, as I said, a lot of this has been in the works or been talked about since
Yeah.
2016 and 2018. So now is the time.
But
Okay,
that's,
I'm not quite sure what that condition is or what the language
What's the
is, or
recommendation?
whether the task force nearly needs to meet once or be formed or come up with plans, or whether the plans that whatever they suggest be implemented. I'm not quite sure what you're
Well, I'm
saying.
afraid if we say that they have to come up with the plan before this is voted on and gets into the CIP budget, that would effectively quash this, which is not the idea here. I just want to make sure it's that the task force will have input into what happens so that we don't end up with a worse parking situation than we do right now.
Okay,
I'm
so
not-
what's the language?
Right.
What's the language?
That this can, the 04021 approved with the condition that the task force meet before this is approved to discuss. I'm just going to say the prospect of parking solutions. That means that they don't have to come up with them all before, because there's no way a task force is going to be as speedy as the Maritime Task Force and come up with things in a few months. It's got to be that they get started and that this can't happen without the input of Eastport. That's all I'm saying. I can work on the language as we move on to the next item and just email it to you guys, and then you can approve it or disapprove it.
I mean, we're basically, we're making a recommendation to approve, and that a condition that they, a recommendation really, that they meet with the city of, I'm sorry, the Maritime Republic of Eastport. I've always been wanting for you guys to secede, and you still haven't. I support you in your succession.
This could do it. No, just kidding.
Okay, so I mean, I don't see it being a big deal to make a recommendation to the city or a condition that they meet with the task force once within, at least meet with the task force within the next year to come up with parking and parking concerns to be accommodated. I don't see that being a big issue. You're just asking the city to meet with them and give them their fair share into the fight. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I think that's the right motion. That's pretty close.
Yeah. Okay. So the motion is to recommend approval of 0421 with a condition that the city meet with the Eastport Parking Task Force. Is that correct? Parking Task Force?
Well, they have since disbanded. So there's a task force that's already formed. I think some people have already been designated. So the task force that the city has already agreed to.
How about meet with the Eastport Civic Association's
task force on parking.
Task Force at Eastport Civic Association about parking concerns with this improvement mobility plan. That's
perfect.
it.
Yep.
Okay. So we recommend approval ordinance 0421 with a condition that the city meet with the Eastport Civic Association's parking representatives with respect to the mobility plan's parking and boat accommodation parking. Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And we got two. Oh, we got three.
I'm going to abstain.
Aye.
I don't like what we're voting on, so I'm going to abstain.
Okay, you can abstain.
I don't want to vote no, but I don't want to vote yes, so I'm going to abstain.
Very fair. Mr. Waldman, was you a yay or a nay? It's your
Well,
motion with a condition?
The condition is so unclear that I'm not even sure what I'm voting on. But
Okay,
it's-
then I'm
it's
changing-
mostly- allow me to finish, please.
Oh, sorry.
But, it's merely a recommendation of approval and it needs to get moved. And so even under this condition, I'll vote to recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Waldman. So the motion carries with the condition that the city staff meet with the Eastport Civic Association regarding parking concerns with the mobility plan, hopefully within the next year. Very simple, and I don't think it's going to cause too much angst. That motion is approved. Kimberly, you got all that, or is it unclear?
I am not clear on who made the motion and who seconded, actually.
Bob made the motion.
Okay,
I seconded it, and the condition was added by Commissioner Butler. And Mr.
Thank you.
Klein abstained.
got that. All right, thank you.
All right, we've
All
now
right.
spent an hour on this.
No, not quite. That was about 26 minutes. Okay, moving on to the next item. That closes out item 1, ordinance 04021. The next item, PD 2019-001, plan development for preliminary subdivision from the National Lutheran Communities. This is the village at Providence Point, also known in past, the land being the Crystal Springs area. So this property is located on Forest Drive and Spa Road at the intersection, very large parcel. And this public hearing has been open for the last 2 meetings where we've had the developer present, and we'd like to have the developer continue their presentation. Wait a minute.
No, we're doing Primrose.
My apologies. Well, thank you for putting Mr. Dale's picture up there. That got me back in there. We're going to go into Mr. Dale. We had moved item 3 to number 2. Sorry, I've been listening to Diane for so long, I forgot what I'm doing. Good stuff. Thanks, Di. We're moving it back. So item 3, major site design plan application by Primrose School and Nesseth Israel Synagogue property and the franchising company for Spa Road and Hilltop Lane, right across from the Quick Mart there. This public hearing is continued from December 2nd, and that was our second meeting. So this will now be our third meeting, I believe, with regards to this and the changes at hand. And Mr. Dale is the lead counsel, I guess, and lead representative for the applicant's team. And so there were some changes to go back and talk about. So if we could get those, anything from the staff first before the applicant presents?
No, Mr. Chairman, nothing specific. We did have, I can't remember if it was 4 or 5 meetings with the applicant and their transportation planner and public works, back and forth, and continue revisions to the conceptual design that I sent you all earlier. I think Mr. Dales is going to go through that in detail.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else from staff? All right, on to Mr. Dales, please, and to continue, and you do your presentation, and we'll ask questions after that. And is there anyone, and we do have people online for public comment as well after you're finished.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to all the members of the commission. I do have a quick set of slides that I think will be the most efficient way to present the changes that you'll be interested in tonight. So, Mr. Chairman, if you just stop your, I think you just stopped your screen share there. I'll go ahead and share mine. All of these changes we're presenting to you tonight relate to the access to the project, which was the remaining issue of interest, and we've addressed all the other criteria for major site design plan approval, including forest conservation and the layout of the site, the architecture, and of course, we're here for any questions you may have on that once we finish this presentation. But these 6 changes will represent what we have done since we first met with you, and much of it since we last met with you, to provide a well-functioning access in and egress out of this site at Hilltop and Spa. We are very appreciative of the efforts of the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning and Zoning. We've come together and collaborated many times and finally come up with a solution that avoids the problems that this Planning Commission expressed its greatest concerns with. And namely the U-turns that were in our initial proposal, the concern of the Planning Commission as people entering the site would need to pass as they were coming from the west going east and make U-turns in the neighborhoods that are just to the north of Hilltop Lane, and then come back to the site to enter through a right-in only access. And then in leaving the site, the traffic was initially directed north up Spa Road, and people would the concern was that people would have to make U-turns in the neighborhoods on Spa to then come around and go south on Spa and get to points south of this site. So with that, let me begin. The 6 issues are we've expanded the right-of-way width of Hilltop Lane by taking land from the synagogue, which is south of Hilltop Lane, and that was a suggestion of this commission. We've added a left turn in so that the westbound traffic will no longer need to pass the site and make U-turns. We've added a median island on Hilltop to control the interaction between east and westbound traffic as that left-hand turn is made. We've also increased pedestrian and biker safety associated with and vicinity of that access point. And we've allowed now for left turns onto Spa Road so that traffic will not have to either go north on Spa or go all the way to Forest, where there are no lefts. And so traffic again would have had to go north on Forest and find a way to come back south through a U-turn or some other left across Forest. Finally, we've retained the crosswalk that we proposed across Hilltop and employee parking at the synagogue. Although we are compliant with parking requirements without that, we felt this would reduce any pressure on the parking and also just add a community benefit in the connectivity that's represented in that crosswalk. The right-of-way width is represented here. This is what we proposed the last time that you talked to us. These 2 red markers indicate places where there was a problem with the width, and that problem is associated with the need to expand the westbound lanes and provide for the structures that you'll see for the left turn in to function properly. and to allow the traffic that's going east past the site to be able to pass by any left-hand turners if there's someone who has to wait a while to make the left. We've added approximately 5 to 8 feet along this red line here, taken out of the private property of the synagogue to expand the right-of-way in this area that you're seeing highlighted in red. That width was key to allowing these changes that we're going to go through in the remaining 5 changes. And so what you're seeing there, if I go back and forth, is just in the scale of this plan, the 5 to 8 feet is not as easy to notice, but without it, we weren't able to accommodate this insert blow up that you see and are going to see again repeated throughout these slides. So here's the key change now. We, after much effort, have come to consensus agreement with Department of Public Works staff and Department of Planning and Zoning on how to allow traffic to come into this site with a left-hand turn as it comes west from Forest Drive. That's going to be particularly important in the evening hours as people come to pick up their kids at this early education center. This is what we came to with last time. And this is where access to the site is still only, there was, in this case, left-bound or exiting traffic could go through the intersection and was no longer channeled up SPA, but traffic entering the site still could not make a left in. And so you see the problem here in this red circle at Chatham Lane. There was also problems at Farragut and one other neighborhood street farther east that were going to be concerns for people passing this site and then making U-turns to come back and get to the site here with this red in arrow. So here's what we've done instead. At the request of the Department of Public Works, we have split ingress and egress, the access, and we now have this left turn in. You'll see this repeated through my slides, but here's the island that I've mentioned, and here's the left in motion. So people coming from Forest Drive will go through the intersection, and those needing to make a left in have room for 2 cars to stack, which would be more than sufficient, and will cross a point on Hilltop where the oncoming traffic consists of only 1 lane. That was an important issue for safety from the Department of Public Works point of view. And if there are ever queuing up to here, again, we've expanded this right away to allow eastbound traffic the ability to pass by in the unexpected events that ever does happen. The important thing, again, both for the biker safety and for the safety of the turning motion in here for vehicles, is that if vehicles turning left in are only facing 1 lane of oncoming traffic, they will be able to safely determine when they can cross rather than looking to 2 different lanes to make sure two vehicles are stopping for them or are not coming on. This added median I touched on briefly a moment ago. What the concern was that traffic coming west or eastbound, looking to make the left in, would be facing head-on traffic coming into the shared lane going west. And with no structure there, there was some concern that people that currently move west get into this lane early and might be accelerating. And so working with Department of Public Works and Traffic Concepts, who joined us as a traffic consultant after you raised your access concerns, we now have this median to prevent that, to control that interaction. So now traffic going west won't be able to come into this lane to then access the left turn. They'll have to pass the access and then split out into the 2 through lanes, right turn lane, and if you need to go left, which is a fairly infrequently used motion from the existing traffic, then break into this left lane here. There's still plenty of queuing room. The next issue was the increased pedestrian and biker safety over what we had proposed, especially with the addition of the left in. Here was the problem. You can see at this red circle what the concern from the Department of Public Works, I think correctly was, so the left turns in and a lot happening right here, that these vehicles coming westbound facing all these changes would perhaps try to too early move over into the right or pass vehicles in front of them on the inside towards the site and be a danger to cyclists who are on the existing shoulder looking to come up onto our shared hiker-biker trail that's elevated along our site, but isn't here. And so what the Department of Public Works asked for and what we're providing are these tubular markers in the westbound lanes that will protect cyclists from vehicles here coming over or vehicles here making the turn too wide. And so vehicles or bicycles now will come along the existing bike area, be protected by these barriers here, and then come up onto the hiker biker trail right here, or right here in the blow up. The left turns onto Spa are critical for the afternoon traffic that leaves the site. I think the concern from the Planning Commission members has been that in the evening, a lot of the traffic leaving will be trying to get to points in the peninsula or south of the site, and none of the egress options allowed for access to the public roads going that way. Really, the options to go south of the site are either to make a left out and head towards Eastport to get to Gemini or all the way to Bay Ridge, or to be able to make a left onto Spa, because Forest Drive going farther does not allow for a left south. So here are the problems. This barrier that we were putting in didn't allow traffic exiting the site to get over into this left turn lane. And several of the planning commissioners expressed interest in revisiting that. And so we did that. And here's now the proposal where traffic exiting the site can, as they often will in the morning hours, continue in the two existing through lanes to go through the intersection and get to Forest, or in the evening when a majority of the traffic, which I want to continue to remind everyone is not a very high volume, even at peak hour. We're talking even during surge of peak hour, a vehicle every 30 to 40 seconds, a single vehicle. And people leaving the site, what percentage of them need to go south can now do so. They can exit the site and make a left onto Spa to then go get down to Forest Drive. That has not been possible in our prior proposals to you. And 6, this is the crosswalk we proposed. Now, previously that was proposed in conjunction with the off-site parking solution. Now, the off-site parking was a solution to the U-turn problem, where we were proposing that people coming to the site in the evening have the ability to park at the synagogue and then cross at the crosswalk. And a number of the commissioners did not feel that was a realistic solution because of the distance that the synagogue lot was from the crosswalk, and because of the children that would be with the parents there and the time it would take. And so we've now got the left-in solution instead. However, we're not withdrawing the offer to have the employees park at the synagogue. So that will free up parking at the site, and also will provide the crosswalk, which is a significant expense that's associated with this employee parking, even though that's not needed or required anymore and not part of our access solution. It does add a significant public benefit to have a crosswalk here to complete this this intersection. I mean, crosswalk at each of the 4 roads that come to it. So here's where the employee parking was previously. These were going to be designated employee spots. We don't expect that they'll need to be utilized much by the parents, given the stay of drop off, is very high, conservatively estimated to be 7 minutes, and therefore, we don't expect more than 15 of these spots to be full at any given time, and there are 39 of them. Now these spots that were previously going to be potential employee spots won't be used by the employees. The employees will be parking here where the parking symbol is, off-site at the synagogue, and we'll continue to add the crosswalk and free up those spaces. So that is my final slide. I would note to the commissioners that we have both our engineers from Traffic Concepts and the civil engineers here. We, as a reminder, are still providing this hiker biker at 8 feet all the way along the site, and then continuing past the corner, which is a revision you asked us to make, and it tapers down to meet the existing sidewalk. And in addition to what we're physically constructing here, we'll provide an additional future access easement for the full 8 foot of width, should the city ever be interested in having this be a part of its bicycle network, which at the current time, we don't understand it to be. Nonetheless, we're offering that to give the city flexibility. So those are my reminders, and we have our consultants here. If you have any questions about this or other aspects of the project. And with that, I'll conclude. Thank you.
Mr. Dales, thank you very much for one of the most professional, efficient, quick mitigation strategy briefs to us. I like what I see, and I'll let my other commissioners make their comments and questions at first. Go ahead.
Is there a sidewalk on the Knesset Israel side?
There is, Commissioner Waldman. I would ask either Kyle or Ken Schmid to talk about what the changes are to that sidewalk, if any, because of the right-of-way expansion. Hey, Kyle, if you're.
Hey, it's Kyle Schmid. Yeah, there is an existing sidewalk on the south side of Hilltop Lane, and we will just be rebuilding that. Just it's going to be right off the back of the curb. I believe it's 8 foot width. I think it's like an asphalt today. But yes, we plan on rebuilding that sidewalk with the widening.
Is it possible, is there enough room there to provide a grass strip between whatever sidewalk is there and the curb?
I'd have to look at the right of way. I know that we're widening anywhere from 2 to 8 feet there with the right of way.
I mean, you could probably do with a 6 foot sidewalk. You really don't need 8.
Yeah, I think it would be better to have 2 feet of buffer instead of 8 foot sidewalk width.
If the Department of Public Works and the commission would like us to do that, we're happy to construct it that way, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's if you are going to have employee parking all the way down there, it needs to be a safe and pleasant way to walk all the way up to the intersection and back.
Should the commissioners ask for that on any approval, I would just ask for some confirmation from Mr. Tom Smith and Mr. Sam Bryce, if that they would want that as well. Just, I'm sure that sounds like something they would want. We just would want to know that we're agreeing with them.
My sense on, am I muted still?
No, we can hear you.
Okay, my sense is when that's that sidewalk is not actually a sidewalk on that side of the street. That is actually a hiker biker that was installed because of the narrowness of the eastbound lane there. And so it needs to be replaced, and it needs to be replaced at its same width.
Is there some way to bring it off the curb though, to make it safer?
I think that if the applicant and the synagogue are willing to provide the additional easement area, I don't think there's a problem increasing, putting a 2 foot buffer in it.
When we get to a later point in the hearing, I believe there are members of the synagogue present, and we could talk to them to get a sense of their confidence that they'd be willing to provide an additional 2 feet at that point. And if so, maybe we could agree to that as a condition.
Ben, I'm happy to go next. I really appreciate the work Mr. Dales and his team has done, but I'm fundamentally thinking that this is not a safe project. And it's all the additional work that's been done, to me, feels like just shuffling the decks, the chairs on the Titanic. I feel like it's a lot of stuff that's been changing, but it's still a really dangerous intersection. And I just don't see it. So anyway, I'm just saying in advance that I feel like this is a dangerous location to do this school. I love the idea of the school. I see the need for it. It's just not working. So I'll be voting against it.
Commissioner Butler, just if those are comments directed at us, I would just ask the access issues are not use specific. Any use at this site to have access to the public roads and avoid U-turns to the neighborhoods would need a left in. And so if there's anything specific to this proposal that's objectionable, we'd want to know. If it's just that there should not be access from the public street to the site, then I'd ask that to be clarified.
Okay.
I have a quick, can I ask a question, Ben, before you start?
Go right ahead. Go ahead.
Another one, thanks. You've created this left turn in, going east on Hilltop. What's the queuing length? How many cars will that queue hold?
Commissioner Waldman, that queuing length was set based on the traffic simulation model, the synchro model. And so, Kyle, if you could give us the numbers and justification of why.
I don't have it right in front of me, but the 95th percentile queue is only about 2 cars. And we did Yeah, there's only 2 cars in,
What does
and
95th percentile mean? I'm sorry.
95% of the time it's less
Of
than
the
that.
max.
Okay, so 95% of the time, there'll be no more than 2 cars you project trying to get in?
Correct. And we also, like Phil had mentioned previously, that the taper for the left turn lane, and also providing that 5-foot bike lane heading eastbound that is not present today also provides a bypass area just in case there was a surge at some point, which our projections did not show that happening.
How many cars can fit into that queue?
The full left turn lane section is about 2.5, and then you have another, it looks like you probably fit 3 or so in the taper, and then you can also have some more come back where it's just the single eastbound 3-lane with the shoulder.
I'm lost. What I see is a space there, and there's a thin line, right? That thin line. How many cars fit in there where the cursor is going?
Yeah, it's about 2.5 car lengths.
Okay, what's behind, and what's when you call that the taper?
Yes.
But that doesn't, the width isn't enough for a car there.
That's why we provide a bypass width on the side so they can
I
get
see,
around
okay.
if needed.
So they can go around, but if there are 4 cars, then it stops the eastbound traffic?
Yes, but our 95th percentile queue is 2 cars.
Okay. Okay, you're confident.
They're crossing one lane there, and also in traffic, as a driver, if you're in that one lane, you're supposed to keep that entrance lane open to let them cross. I know a lot of people don't do that, but some do, like myself.
So two specific things, and these are coming from a cyclist standpoint. I think, where you have those plastic bollards, I would really hope you don't do that. I think that's going to, as somebody who rides a bike through there all the time, that's going to cause more problems than it's worth. I think paint would be better because, just to show people this is an option to do. But, if you want to go straight, because, sometimes people riding on a bike fast want to stay in the traffic lane. Having the bollards there is just, someone's going to hit it. And they're hard to maintain, and so anyway, I think those are unneeded.
So you're saying that some bikers wouldn't jump up on the bike trail,
No,
they would stay in the lane to go straight, maybe?
Yeah. So here's, I wear multiple hats when I ride a bike. If I'm, on my road bike in my spandex, I'm generally coming up through here at 18, 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, depending on the wind. I'm not going to go up on the biker path. But when I'm in my, on my upright bike with my street clothes, and I'm trying not to get sweaty, I'll go up on the shared use path because that's the easiest thing to do. So I think assuming everybody's going to do that is a very bad assumption, and it just causes more. It's just more stuff the city has to maintain. That in those plastic bollards, they always break. They get hit by plows. Whatever. I think that's just not needed. Just paint it and it'll be fine. So that's one comment.
May I respond to Commissioner Pine's?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure.
Okay. One of the issues that we had as we looked at this was the problem of drivers shooting through that intersection by scooting around other drivers. And this is particularly a problem if the car that is in that straight lane is a truck, because that screens the left turn movement from being able to see who's there. Those bollards were primarily put in not necessarily for the cyclists, but to shrink that lane down so there would not be bypassing on the right. Now,
so I would assert you just made it worse. So make that little island a little bit wider then, if you want to keep it narrow.
Then you are going to encroach into the bike lane. We actually had an accident further down at Boxwood where there was a pedestrian crossing the street. The car stopped for the pedestrian, and a car drove around the stopped car into the bicycle lane and struck the pedestrian. So we see trying to ensure that you only have this single lane coming through there as being very important to being able to make this intersection work. We went through numerous scenarios here until we came up with this solution to neck this down to a single lane so that we could safely get this left turn movement to move through there.
May I add, thank you, appreciate that. Sam, I was going to relay those comments for you, not remembering you were here yourself. But Commissioner Pline, I just would ask for clarity if the two different types of bikers you're referring to might, in the case of cyclists, come through in this through lane and stay here in this lane and go on the inside of the bollards. And then if you're on your commuter, maybe be coming from here and come up on the inside of the bollards onto the hiker biker. Is there a reason that wouldn't be an available option for the cyclist who doesn't want to get on the?
Yeah, I'm not hard over, and I just very much dislike that kind of traffic furniture in that context. But I'm not going to argue with you about it.
I mean, Alex, let's look at the biker laws and driving law. I mean, if you're a biker and you're on the road, do you actually have the option of staying on the road or going on the trail? And do the bollards create?
Yes.
And the bollards now create. If the bollards are there, are the bollards not only to stop traffic, but in essence, by law, do they stop you from going straight, or do they?
No,
not?
I mean, if what I was
driving, I wouldn't expect you to go through those bollards.
No, so what I would do here, if those bollards are there, is I'm going to move left into the center of the travel lane, and I'm going to stop the cars behind me. I'm going to control those cars from passing me. And then I'll move over if I'm going to make a right turn. Again, it's fine. It's not worth arguing about.
Let's get a best solution here, though, because that's just a minor thing there.
Well,
we can maybe change.
I'm willing to just accept that. I think that's yuck, but I'll leave that as my personal opinion and let it go.
What if the distance between the bollards, especially at that curve there, where people are encouraged to go up onto the trail. What if the bollards were wide enough apart for a cyclist to pass through, but narrow enough to look like they're a barrier to automobiles?
Yes.
Would that solve?
I'd be fine with that. That's a nice solution.
Okay. That's a detail that I think staff needs to recall, because I think it would solve both DPW's concerns, which are well taken, and Pline's concerns, which are also well taken.
And the second thing that I had was about the shared use path on the synagogue side. It's only 800 feet long, and nobody uses it that way because it's a wide shared use path that comes from nowhere and goes to nowhere. And, I think it's going to be one of these things where it's that right of way is better served to make it a nicer pedestrian experience. And, if it's 6 feet wide, somebody can ride it's not like there's 1,000 people walking on that sidewalk at the same time. If somebody is riding a bike on it, 6 feet is fine. So I think it's a better use of that right of way.
I wouldn't necessarily
say
6
foot with the 2 foot buffer.
I wouldn't necessarily say it goes from somewhere and goes nowhere, because it loops all the way. It goes from Spa Road on the south all the way around, curves around in front of the synagogue, goes all the way to the synagogue's parking lot. And the hopes would be that, you got to build them and they'll come, right? You build the sidewalk all the way to the property line of the synagogue, which they've already pretty much done. Thank you, Knesset Israel. And we hope that if we can get the neighbors to then build onto that. So I love
right.
that.
But Mr. Bryce was asserting that they had to have the width for the shared use path for that 800 feet because that's what's there now. I'm saying that's basically a wasted shared use path. Nobody uses it that way. And there's not likely to be anything that wide continuing on down Hilltop Lane in the future because there's a bike lane there. And, there's no right of way on the other side of Spa Road. So essentially what I'm saying is I think it's not needed to replace, to keep that shared use path there. While I think it's the idea of having it there was well intentioned, it's superfluous. And I think the better use of the space is to have a 6-foot sidewalk and a 2-foot buffer. So people that are walking there, and there are a lot of people that walk it there, go look on Saturday afternoons. You're going to see a lot of people walking there on the Sabbath. And I think that's where that should be. I think
Commissioner
shared
Klein,
use path on that side for 800 feet is just a waste of space.
I understand your point, Commissioner Klein. We are happy to either build with the existing width, the reduction in the 8 feet to the 6 feet with a 2-foot grass barrier, or to seek the additional 2 feet to allow the 2-foot grass and also, maintain the existing width of that path.
Either way.
Either way.
But I don't know what's possible there. But so and then my generic comments is that I stand by those written comments that I made in the past. And honestly, I really don't know how this is going to work out. I think it's in the best interest of the Primrose folks to inform their patrons, of the issues here and not to make it worse, especially, westbound with the Board of Appeals queuing issue. I think it's in their best interest to explain how this should all work. But given the mitigations we've seen here, and there are a lot of positives in this project that I won't go through them all, but there are a lot. While I'm still nervous that I hope we don't think about this in 5 years and say, geez, this is a mess. We made a mistake. I think given what we've seen here, that flipped my bit, not by much, but I think that did.
Okay, we still have to hear from the public. Anything else from the commissioners to ask the applicant presentation right now, commissioners? Okay, over to members of the public for public comment. We now open this for more public comment, as we've had some in the past. So city staff, anybody online that want to present? How many do you have?
It does not seem like we have anyone for this item tonight.
You sure? I thought we had some.
Schindelmeyer.
There were some written comments.
Who's that Brooks guy
Alderman
up at the
Schindelmeyer
top there with the hand raised? The guy up here. Brooks, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to reiterate again, with the changes that have been made to this proposal, it would be a great benefit to the city and the community. The Primrose School has been nothing but good neighbors to other sites where they've been. I have reached out to other elected officials that have Primrose properties in their district or ward or whatever various thing all around, and they have all said the Primrose School has been a fantastic neighbor. They have had a very positive community meeting along with the members of Congregation Knesset Israel. We are getting some fantastic sidewalk improvements, bikeability improvements, a crosswalk in an area that is sorely lacking a crosswalk. And this is a big step forward towards goals I'm trying to work on as another thing to improve walkability and mobility in this area without a car. And then finally, this project is essential to the Congregation Knesset Israel in order to maintain, keep the rabbi that they have finally been able to hire for the first time since 2016. That is a thing that we need to keep in mind. Without this, they will lose that. So I fully support this project and I highly encourage everybody to do the same.
Okay. Thank you.
Bob, you got anything?
Well, Mr. Schindelmeyer, we unfortunately are unable to look into the financial or theological problems or issues within Knesset Israel. I'm sorry. All we got is site design authorities here. And we don't have use. We don't look at the use. We only look at how it's going to work. But I think that your vote of approval and support is sincere and complete. And I take it to heart. And I think you and we all see that there have been many changes to this made as a result of conversation and feedback and the community, the involvement of the Planning Commission is making this a better project if it's approved. Thank you.
Any other questions for Alderman Sheldon? Brooks, thank you very much. Do we have any other representation to speak for the project online?
Mr. Chair, also, I know there's been some confusion tonight with where things are lined up. I do have Laura Townsend raising her hand. I don't have her on a list to speak, but I can bring her forward. I think she has maybe some
always want more public testimony if we can get it. Let's go for it.
All right. Ms. Townsend?
Hi, how are you?
Excellent. We hear you fine.
All right. As you might have guessed, I originally tuned in for the Village of Providence Point. But
you got a bonus.
I'm sorry.
You got a bonus.
I did get a bonus in that I reside off of Forest Drive, as I've stated before. And I had seen hearing signs and known the property was sold, but I had no idea they were intending to put a project of this size and scope there. Particularly as in arguing with Mr. Goldsmith online, it's only about 300 yards from an intersection that will be impacted by the Village of Providence Point. I travel both those roads on a daily basis, at least twice, taking my own son to school. And I have two private schools on a road that I live off of, Arundel on the Bay. And I know from practical experience that putting a school of this size on that busy intersection is just going to wreck the traffic on Hilltop and Spa. And one of the commissioners made a question of my biggest concern, which is that Arundel on the Bay gets backed up to Bay Ridge Avenue when parents back out of the school parking lot onto the public street. It's twice, once in the morning and once in the afternoon, to pick up their children and create tremendous traffic jams and accidents. And it's gotten to the point where for St. Anne's and the public elementary school, they need cops out there almost every day to direct traffic. So I have not had enough advance notice about the scope and type of this project. And my objection is that it is going to further ensnare traffic in the area and impact Bay Ridge and Forest Drive. It's a peninsula. It's notable that all the residents in the area know that when Forest Drive is backed up for hours, the only way you can get into Eastport and further down to Arundel on the Bay is to scoot around the Hilltop, which will not be as much of an option if this project is built and jams that whole sector up. So I will be submitting written opposition in comments to this, but I think that this commission has a bird's eye view in knowing all the projects that are under development, and some of us in the community only become aware of them incidentally, like tonight, and therefore haven't had a full chance to make our voices known. But I do plan on spreading the word that between these two projects, life as we know it on the peninsula all the way down to Eastport is going to dramatically change. And so one, if not both of these projects, should not be allowed to go forward. And that'll conclude my comments. Thank you.
Ms. Townsend, thank you very much for those comments, and always good to get comment from people further down on Forest Drive on the peninsula out of the city. Anyone else have any comments for us online tonight? Staff, anyone else?
I have no one else signed up and no one's raising their hand.
All right, Julian, what do you think of the project? No, I'm just kidding, man. Let's keep going. All right, well, that will conclude the public comment for tonight. So we will now go into close the public comment and go into deliberations by commissioners. And we've heard a lot of deliberation before. Commissioners, go for it.
Well, you heard where I stand, and I would just comment on Ms. Townsend's comment, her last comment. She should know, and the public should know, that the Providence Point project is not even considered in the data for the traffic study because it hasn't been approved, even though it's been in the pipeline. So that's important to know. But yep, I'm voting no. Thanks very much.
Gotcha. You've decided that before we even had public comment. So, anyone else?
Well, the public comment didn't do anything to help me change my
No. We weren't finished everything.
Well, I'll
No
just
worries.
add that the plan that we've seen tonight is, to me, is the best rendition of anything that I've seen for this site in terms of the way it might work. And I am very sensitive to how the comments of the operators of Primrose have, because obviously they know their operations, they know the way their operations work in other places, and they've assured us that they don't operate like a typical elementary school or a private school or high school, whatever, where everybody 100 families show up within a 15-minute period. They've said this is not the way we operate our business, and I have to take their word for it. It's not like they have many other locations that operate, at least from the testimony we've heard, that operate in that way, and because that's just how they run their school, versus very, very set hours of something like a public or private elementary school. And like I said before, it's really in their best interest to stick to that, because the condition that I think we're going to impose about the queuing that came from the Board of Appeals certainly deals with that, and so they'll have they'll have some skin in this game to make sure that they are operating in that model. I almost wish we could make the left turn queuing into that piece, but I think that's probably asking too much. But in general, again, it might be a problem, it might not be a problem, but I think this has moved it in addition to, as Alderman Chandelmeyer said, all of the positives of this project, have moved the needle for me, into the plus side.
Thank you, Commissioner Pline. I'm going to go ahead and say it again, Mr. Dales. Thank you for that efficient, well done mitigation strategy brief for our concerns today. It really got things across in a simplified way. One good picture, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and it was to the point. I couldn't believe the fact that you guys went back and worked out with Sam Bryce and the gang a mitigation strategy which allayed every concern I had, plus the others. I thought you might come back with just one or two of the concerns mitigated, but still an unworking strategy. I like it. And you got imaginative. You got some things I didn't even think of. That shows a lot of money spent, legal fees, professional fees, you name it, to get to that conclusion. And I really appreciate this is one of the few projects where I've seen such consternation of issues be addressed in whole, and some added on with the idea of the taking of land across the street. Me or somebody else came with that, give up a little land and let's expand the lanes or what have you. Wonderful idea. And coming up with the idea of moving the parking for the employees across the street, another great idea. I think this adds, as Mr. Schandelmeyer said, adds a lot of benefits for making that intersection a little bit safer for everybody. It may not be perfect. Nothing's ever perfect. And yes, you are going to have some more traffic with any development, but it does do it in a way that is beneficial for the surrounding area and helps things make safe for the community. And there's a ton of people in apartments, condos, and houses down the road that are going to appreciate some of these changes. Traffic concerns, Ms. Townsend brought up. We had thought about that in our last couple of meetings, and she was unable to see us debate that, but that was a big concern of ours. But in this model of schooling, that, as Mr. Klein said, not everybody's coming in that 15-minute window, and it's spread out. And again, Mr. Dales, I'll ask you, what are the age groups of these kids that are getting served at this school?
The applicant himself is on the line, Mr. Matt Taylor, but it's everything from preschool up until elementary school age kids. And so it's a 3-hour window over which the arrivals at the site at their most frequent are typically for a stretch of an hour, once every 46 seconds. And then at the peak for roughly 8 or 9 minutes, once every 30 seconds. And mostly it's less than that. So over a 3-hour period, that's the flow that we see.
And you have a parking lot to accommodate as a buffer that flow, rather than everybody on the street, and no major buses showing up, no busing. So a lot to be liked with that. Thank you, Mr. Dales.
The specifics are 6 months to school age. I just received a message from the applicant.
And you're looking at all day care, after school care, or just all day care?
Just daycare. It's 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. and it's not open on weekends, so weekdays only.
There you go. Thank you very much, Mr. Dales. Hopefully that allays some of the concerns Ms. Townsend has. I'm sure not all, but some. So me right here, I'm in support of what I see. I see Knesset Israel and the applicant, the developer, they're coming to a very good conclusion for the city. And I'm not going to take up any more time for the rest of my commissioners. What do you think?
So I haven't had a chance to say anything at all, but I will say this. I will say this. I share a lot of the concerns that some of the people have. You know, we don't really know. I think that Mr. Dales has made a valiant effort to really mitigate a lot of the problems. Some of those issues, I'm not sure if I agree with them completely. The queuing lane, I'm not sure if I believe two spaces is enough for that. But, you know, we do have a little bit more that we can, you know, it may or may not be a problem. Who's to say? I'm not a traffic concept person on that. I don't think that the employee lot means anything at all. We all saw what happened with the main ingredient, where they were kind of given a pass and said, oh, their employees will park elsewhere. That doesn't happen. You know, you can say that as much as you want, but who's to say the employees will actually park there, or if they will, how long will enforce that? And I'm not sure if that's even that much of a big deal, to tell you the truth. So I'm tentatively headed towards approval, but not quite as strongly as Alex, and certainly not as strong as Ben. But I do appreciate all of everything that you've done to try to mitigate this. I feel that Knesset Israel saw the writing on the wall. That's why they gave up that land, and I appreciate that. And I think it was a good balance there.
Thank you, Commissioner. We took suggestions from the public and staff and from this commission, and the synagogue we owe a lot of thanks to, as well as DPW, in being able to accommodate all those suggestions.
So I was not really excited, to say the least, by this project when it came in. It's a piece of property that has for years has had the problems that we've gone into so deeply. In fact, I was rather negative about it. I want to congratulate staff and the Department of Public Works, the staff of planning, and as well as Public Works, on their willingness to get back into this and to be flexible and to really come up with some ideas. And I think that's they're to be commended. I'm going to make a motion that this application be approved with 3 conditions in addition to the conditions which are outlined in the staff report. And if I could share the screen, if I can figure out how to do that. Once again, I'm such an old fart when it comes to things like this. We okay? Can you see? Can you see it?
Yep.
You guys okay? All right. So the first condition is taken, just pasted out from the Board of Appeals and this whole queuing violation system that they set up, with 2 important additions. Not only does it address the obstruction of westbound traffic, but also now with this left turn lane into the project, it has to address eastbound traffic as well. You'll see that in bold. And then I add in the first paragraph there, an additional third sort of subcondition that a queuing violation can be anything which causes interruption of the eastbound flow on Hilltop Lane by virtue of left turns into the facility. I mean, you know, traffic engineers and their counts are all well and good, and I'm not quite sure what 95% certainty means in the real world. But frankly, if lots of people are making left turn lanes into a queue lane, which can only hold 2.5 cars, and you've got 4 or 5 cars that want to get in, you're going to block all of the eastbound traffic on Hilltop Lane. And that will be a queuing violation. And that could cause this business to have to shut down, frankly. So that's added. Going down to the bottom of the page. Finally, I
You can enforce that.
finally, really, nobody laughs at my jokes, but at any rate, number 2, the sidewalk on the south side of Hilltop Lane shall be designed, funded, and constructed by the applicant. The sidewalk shall be separated from the curb by 2 feet of grass space. You guys figure it out. Okay?
I like it.
Okay. We've heard enough on both sides, and I don't think it's up to us to come down at this point. We know what would make for safety in this area, and that would make for safety. 3, this is based on the discussion. The bollards in the bike lane at the entrance to the parking lot shall be spaced sufficiently wide enough to allow cyclists to pass through. Those are the ones in spandex, but narrow enough that they remain as a visual barrier to automobiles to satisfy Mr. Bryce's concerns.
I like it. I think the wording is perfect.
Okay, you guys figure out the details, but these are the conditions of approval before you can get to work on this project.
And that motion has been made.
I will second it.
Interesting. Seconded by Mr. Pline. Any further discussion on the motion as it stands?
Mr. Chairman, pardon me. Can we review the wording of the motion one more time?
Ms. Consoli, I would simply send this document to you.
Okay, thank you.
It's the easiest way to do it, okay? And if I forget to do it, remind me, please.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion with the conditions, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I
Any
oppose.
Okay, any abstentions? None. The motion passes with 1 opposition, Ms. Butler. Thank you very much, commissioners.
Thank you,
That
Mr.
will
Chairman,
end
Commissioners.
this item on the agenda. Mr. Dales, thank you very, very much for your hard work on this. And it's been decades that this property has been there, undeveloped. Dare I say a century or more. So, anyone else comments from Mr. Dales and the gang?
Thank you very much, guys.
All right, let's go. How long did this take, by the way?
That took approximately 50 minutes, 51 minutes.
Okay, I win the bet.
Oh, all right.
All right.
No
I'm
way.
buying the beer, I guess.
Oh, no, Mr. Dales has to give us 50 minutes of his legal fee time.
That's about $400, I would guess. All right, we're
Yeah.
going to take a quick 4-minute recess to make bathroom breaks, and we're going to start the next item. So if we could get Providence Point on and everybody set up for that administratively, everybody else go take bathroom breaks. Be back in here in about 5 minutes. All right. Thanks, everyone. We are in recess. And everyone, please mute or stop your video while you're in recess so that there are no inadvertent communications in the background.
Hello?
Hey, Kevin, it's Mike. They're on break.
Mr. Haynes, are you there?
I am. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to let you know, you were here for the Bay Village, correct?
Yeah. Is that it's not happening? I'm guessing.
Right. That I just want to make sure, let you know, so you don't have to sit here.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Have a great night.
Bye.
Okay, Julian, do we have everyone promoted who needs to be by now?
We do, yes.
All right, excellent. All commissioners can come back after your short break. I know probably not enough time. I'll go ahead and call this meeting back to order. We'll get our commissioners back online. There we go. Fantastic. And we're proceeding on to our last item on the agenda for this evening, which is continued from the previous 2 to 3 meetings. The area formerly known as Crystal Springs to many, maybe some currently, and the development at hand. So staff, over to you for any additions on this item that you want to brief before we let the applicant finish their design briefs.
Mr. Chairman, I think staff is going to hold its comments until the end. Would prefer that we get through the witnesses this evening. So I'm going to just defer for now.
Excellent. Okay, over to the applicant to continue their briefing on the design for the third meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alan
Thank you.
Hyatt, on behalf of the village at Providence Point and other applicants. When we concluded last time, if you recall, on January 6th, we had two witnesses that we presented: Mike Klobasco, who was our environmental consultant, and then we also had Mark Pelusi, our landscape architect. We offered into the record some additional exhibits, so you now have 1 through 22 and all the documents that are underneath of it, a pretty significant pile of exhibits for your review. There was mention that at the beginning of tonight's presentation that we'd have an opportunity to give some short rebuttals. And that is how I'd like to start. And then after that, we'll call our witnesses, if that's okay with you. And I'll move right along because I think I can do most of the rebuttals myself. We may need 1 or 2 of our witnesses to clarify some things, but after that, we would call our architect, Aaron Campbell, and then Nancy Randall would be called next. She's our traffic consultant. And then finally, we would call John Arison, who obviously you are familiar with. He's our land planner. And then that, subject to a closing argument and any other rebuttal if it's necessary, then that would conclude our case in chief. And I assume there's going to be additional public testimony after that. But I think that's the plan. And I know that Mr. Smith deferred at this point, but he may weigh in after our witnesses. And I know that the city has a traffic consultant that would also testify after our traffic person. So if that's okay with you, I'll go ahead and get started.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you for the agenda.
All right. Thank you. So there's a number of items that came up from either questions from the public or comments from the public or from the commissioners. And one comment was that I think these came from the opponents or some opponents that the village of at Providence Point was because it's a not-for-profit organization, it would not pay real estate taxes. Well, that's not accurate. Real estate taxes on all of the common areas and all of the independent living units, which consist of the cottages, the units in the independent living building, sometimes referred to as the IL building, and the Maison Court units. All of those properties are taxable. So there's no discount on the tax rate. The tax rate is paid just like any other commercial establishment. And what is exempt, the only exception would be that the portion that is the healthcare area where both assisted living and skilled nursing services are offered can be exempt. And our estimate is we're close to a couple $2 million a year in real estate taxes. So I wanted to clear that up. There was some question about the tree variances, and I don't want to belabor this, but we had Mr. Klobasco describe the features that and the requirements to satisfy the tree variance section of the city code, which is 2171-170. Because the Planning Commission is evaluating the application, it decides on the tree variances. If this were a matter in front of the Board of Appeals, then it would evaluate the tree variances. But it's the Planning Commission that makes the decision on whether to grant these variances. And these are different than zoning variances. There's specific factors spelled out under 2171-170, and we addressed those, if you recall, at the last meeting. And I think the reality is the site can't be used without the tree variances. I mean, those are the facts, and there was nothing that was done on the site by the owner that created that. These are naturally growing trees, and there are a certain number of significant trees, and the idea is to have the variance granted at the location of the the least priority of the priority forest, I guess is the best way to describe it. And as you know, the site is fully forested and is 175 acres. Only 34 acres is being developed. So that's the area where we were asking for the variance. There was also discussion about moderately priced dwelling units, MPDUs. Some opponents claim that MPDUs are required, and that is not accurate. I think my understanding is that the city attorney agrees with the applicant on that, but under chapter 20.30 of the city code, moderately priced dwelling units apply to residential dwellings. And here we have a continuing care retirement community, but under the city code, it's known as an institution for care of the aged. These are not dwelling units that are leased or rented or sold. And that alone carves this out from the moderately priced dwelling unit section of the code. There's no rent paid and there's no purchase price paid. And if you refer to the city code, the only way you calculate these MPDUs, the rental rates and the sale prices is based upon certain rental rates on properties that are for rent in the Baltimore metropolitan area, and the same is true for the sale of these. So it just doesn't apply. We had some discussion. I think this is largely resolved. Mr. Urban raised a number of issues pertaining to the soils on the site. And what happened after the last meeting, the experts on our team, our civil engineer and landscape architect, reached out to Mr. Urban and discussed his concerns. I think they've been largely resolved. These are, highly technical, detailed aspects of how trees are to be planted in certain soils and how the soils are to be handled so that the sidewalks don't break up, for lack of a more specific term. And I think all that's been resolved. I know Mr. Smith had some recommended conditions, and I think they addressed Mr. Urban's concerns. And we know Mr. Urban, that's his background, that's his experience. And I think there was a good exchange of conversation and ideas between our team and him. There was discussion about this Skipper's Lane extension. And there were some pretty, I have to say, outrageous statements made about the extension of Skipper's Lane and how it impacts people of color and somehow harms them. That's just not true. The concept of having a redundant Forest Drive or a road that's redundant to Forest Drive has been on the books for as long as I can remember, probably 25 or 30 years. And this is a reality coming true. Now you will have communities to the west of this site that will have the ability to travel without going to Forest Drive, and communities to the east of the site will have the opportunity to go to to get goods and services that will no longer need to go on to Forest Drive. It's really quite an accomplishment to be able to get this done, and I think it's positive to all that are in the nearby communities. There's a big benefit to them, and to make those kind of allegations that this is somehow racially motivated is just inflammatory and completely false. We also talked about lane widths. And let me just say that the applicant is fine with 10-foot wide lane widths, but I don't know if the Department of Public Works is fine with that. I know there's some people that will talk about that from Public Works. We could live with 10-foot wide lane widths because, they work. It will help slow traffic down, all the things that we had discussed at the last hearing, and that could save 4 feet of paving on Skipper's Lane. But I do not think the Department of Public Works feels like that's an appropriate lane width, and we'll just leave that the department and you to resolve. But, just know that we're prepared to do that. And then parking was a consideration. And, I want to take a few minutes just to talk about the parking, because we have in the city code, I think a somewhat archaic calculation that there's 0.75 spaces per unit for an institution for care of the aged that's required. Well, I don't know how long that's been on the books, but I'm thinking a long time. And we have people today in institutions for care of the aged that drive, and these people need parking spaces. And this is known because of the experience of National Lutheran in their various communities. We have 302 units proposed out of 350 that we call independent living units. They're in the IL or independent living building, Maison Court, and also the standalone cottages. The cottages, I don't think really pose much of a question because they have parking on site for each of the cottages. But there's 272 units in the independent living building and the Maison Court buildings. And based on National Lutheran's experience, 50% of those units will be occupied by 2 people, and half of them will have a second car. So, with the cottages using 60 parking spaces, that's 2 per unit, that's 340 needed to support the independent living occupants. So at any given time, there's 64 more or less members of the staff on premises. They need a parking space. I mean, we don't, until we have better public transit, the reality is they need a parking space. And then there's vendors, care providers, and visitors. And there's an additional 17 parking spaces, during normal business hours for them. There's been no parking spaces assigned to assisted living and skilled nursing beds for obvious reasons, but we don't think the parking is excessive, and it's really the minimum that's needed from a practical point of view. But very importantly, I'm going to share my screen for a moment here and just remind you what the parking, what we're talking about parking wise here. You may recall this drawing.
We see it.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So we have, this is something very rare, and I don't think it should go unnoticed. And I'm sure it doesn't go unnoticed by the Planning Commission. On a site like this, you would, under most circumstances, see quite a bit of surface parking. I mean, you've seen it in many projects. Here, we have parking under the independent living building. We have parking under Maison Court. And 85% of the parking is structured. Now, that's expensive. The economical thing to do would be to have a couple acres of paved parking, but that would take us into the forest. So what we have done is carefully crafted a plan that respects the environmental features, and 85% of the parking is underneath. What we have here, where I'm pointing on this loop road, they're important parking spaces because here's the health center, which is all connected. And we have visitors, vendors, and healthcare providers coming in and parking because they can't be completely vendors. We can't have come into the structured parking because of security reasons. And I don't think that, I mean, if you were to try and eliminate some of these parking spaces, you're not going to eliminate the loop road. You're not going to accomplish much. And I think it would be a burden on the project. I think it's forward thinking on the part of National Lutheran to design it in this fashion. This is a well thought out plan. There's a reason for these parking spaces. Folks even though you may overlook this, I mean, there's people that are over here that might not be capable of walking to a health center if they have a doctor's appointment. They may park in one of these spots over here. I mean, it's just how it works. And the other thing that I think is important not to overlook is there's no place to go. If we have too few parking spaces, where are they going to go? And we've seen that in different communities before, where it's a concern where, okay, you have these overflow parking spaces, visitors, but there's no place to go. And we kind of have that here because the only place we have left is the forest, and we're not looking to. I mean, we've done all these things to preserve the forest, and this is one of them. So that's the approach on parking. Mr. Bradshaw is available if you have any specific questions on parking at the CCRC. But I wanted to give you.
Can I ask you just a quick question?
Sure. Yes.
So in the absence of any minimum parking requirements, is this how much parking you'd build based on what you think you need?
Yes, that's really what it is. I mean, this is being driven by the need, not by some artificial formula.
I mean, usually project developers are complaining the other way around, that minimum parking is requiring too much parking. And
right.
This you're building what you think you need, and
that's right.
That
based on
seems
experience.
reasonable to me.
Yeah. All right, I'll stop sharing the screen. The other item that came up, or one of the other items came up, is this conversation about stream restoration. To be clear, what the applicant is proposing is to restore 502 feet of stream channel restoration. That drains 40-some acres, and it runs under Spa Road, and it's off-site. This is another one of those above and beyond things that the applicant is doing to help on environmental features. This is a big benefit to Crab Creek. I know there's criticism about, from some groups about the impact on Crab Creek. This is a big deal, and it's such a big deal that when we were working with the group that was called Concerned Citizens for Proper Land Use, I mean, we worked with Gerald Weingrad, who spoke to you earlier in the hearings, but that group had retained a gentleman by the name of Daniel O'Leary as an engineer from ESD Associates, and he independently evaluated the stormwater management proposal, which exceeds the 125% of volume, ESD, and he also evaluated the impact of this stream channel, and his conclusion was that the implementation of the stormwater facilities and the stream restoration results in the project in is just a good condition as if it were natural forest. I mean, this is extraordinary what's being done here. And what I think maybe the concerns were the cost that, we estimated $1,000 linear foot for the cost, but it's an obligation that the applicant is committed to undertaking and concluding. And if it's $1,000 a foot or more, it's an obligation that it has to perform. So there's no argument about that. We're not limiting it to the cost estimate. And the fact is, it's a huge benefit to Crab Creek. We also talked about the public use of trails briefly, and I don't want to belabor this, but there was some discussion about the general public having access to use the trails through the forest on private property. This is really a little different type of a program here. We're trying to preserve the forest. We're trying to preserve the natural features. This is not something that we're encouraging public access to private property to interfere in any way with these natural features. Instead, we have along the perimeter, along Forest Drive and Spa Road, a significant walkway or bikeway or pedestrian access, whatever you want to call it, that will be available to the public. So, you know, I just, I know things come up in discussion, but, you know, this is also for security purposes. You know, the owner of the property is going to permit the occupants of the continuing care retirement community to walk the trails in the forest, but you know, there's it just can't be open to the public and under these circumstances. There was some discussion about herbicides and what the city does and doesn't do. There's a 5-year maintenance agreement, and I think Mr. Arison will talk about this, and maybe Mr. Smith can also speak to it, but there's a 5-year obligation. It's a standard type of an agreement. I've seen it many times, and it requires the maintenance of trees and landscaping on new projects. I don't know that there are specific rules when it comes to herbicides. I can let Mr. Arison or Mr. Smith talk about that, but my understanding is that the city requires best management practices. I don't think you're going to see Agent Orange sprayed on the site. You know, the city is careful about what it requires and what it permits, and I think you'll hear a little bit more about that. So those are my my quick review of the items that came up in discussion. If you have any specific questions for any of the witnesses with respect to any of the items that I just mentioned, we're glad to have them speak. And if you do not, then Mr. Chairman, I'll go right to my next witness. Shall I do that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna call Aaron Campbell. Mr. Campbell, would you tell the members of the commission your name, address, and what you do for a living, please?
Yes, my name is Aaron Campbell. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a licensed architect. Do you need street address? I can share that if you'd like.
Give us your office address. Yeah.
Office address is 520 West 6th Street, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28202. I'm a licensed architect, and I have worked in the field for just shy of 25 years. 15 of those years I have been at Perkins Eastman, where I've focused on design for communities and living environments for seniors. I'm an associate principal in our firm, and I'm also part of our thought leadership group that is part of our senior living practice area. I've worked on communities on the East Coast as well as internationally, and I speak and continue to do research on senior living communities.
You've testified as an expert witness before?
Yes.
And where was that?
That was for another project that had a similar scenario, planning commission in North Carolina.
So Mr. Campbell, do you have a professional biography that has been submitted into the record? Are you going to share your screen, by the way?
Yes, I can pull it up.
You want to just pull that up for a moment? That's at page 877. If those of you are following the exhibit pages. So does this summarize your recent significant experience, shall we say?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I feel duty bound, I offer Mr. Campbell as a expert witness in the field of architecture, particularly on senior projects.
Thank you.
And I'll proceed with questioning. Mr. Campbell, after all this time you spent on this project, which is, how long have you been working on this project?
I hate to say, but I think we're closing in on 10 years.
Okay. I assume you're familiar with the city code and the requirements under the code with respect to site design and that sort of thing?
Yes. Anytime we go into a new jurisdiction, we take time to make ourselves familiar with the requirements and build relationships with the members of the authorities having jurisdiction.
I think the Planning Commission from time to time has seen architecture that might not really look like it fits in Annapolis. And your company actually took the time and undertook the responsibility of doing a contextual study. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And would you take a moment and go ahead and refer to that context study, I'll call it. That's under Exhibit 6 at page 26. And I know it's rather detailed, and I don't want you to go through every page, but I'd like you to summarize for the members of the Planning Commission what this study was designed to do, and in your opinion, whether the architecture of this project contextually looks like it belongs in the city of Annapolis.
Sure. I'll take a minute. I'll note I am going to go through a few of the pages of that study we did, but not every page. I'm going to just touch on a couple highlights and may flip through them as I'm kind of speaking with you. If anyone has anything that they would like me to stop on, let me know. But there was a question about if what we were doing was appropriate for Annapolis. And so we reached out to our firm. We are an international firm. We have offices all over the United States as well. And we do have a DC office. And so we reached out to our DC office. And there's another principal that a colleague of mine, Dan Sinelli, who lives in the area. And he spends a decent amount of time in Annapolis and is really quite fond of it. And so we had some research that we had done over the years, having visited the site and visited the location. And we asked him if he could help us maybe capture some of the things that he feels are architecturally significant and help define what Annapolis is. And so we pulled together this study. And what we're really trying to do was to look at the elements and the texture and the feel and the things that help speak to what Annapolis is. It's a very organic city, how it's grown over time. You have many different eras kind of significantly juxtaposed to each other. But at the same time, it really has a unique patterning to it. And so we were really trying to look at what some of those elements were, how you approach the materials, how the neighborhoods are located next to one another, how the use of color and materials and, indication of special or prominent features really was a way to express that character that Annapolis has. It is unique. It is beautiful. And it's something that, we wanted to try and capture. It's not with the purpose of copying it, but, how do you respond to things that have happened there in the city that we can maybe borrow as a way to speak to that character? Sorry, sound like you were asking a question.
No. Go ahead. Continue.
One of the things that came in with the street design of Skippers was the thought of including a small roundabout as a way to help as a demarcator in terms of location, but also traffic calming and speed reduction. And so we wanted to understand, how those work in Annapolis and, what the significance of those are in terms of how they relate to the context of the architecture and the circulation and to that fabric of the city. And so we were looking at, the relationships of buildings to the roundabouts, how they use those as significant locations to divide neighborhoods from one another. Here you can see one that's downtown or near the city center, and they have the residential side, and then you have a much more dense collection of buildings. But yet they still seem to find commonality and the ability to speak to one another around this element. And also the roadways, we worked pretty heavily with civil and landscape to get the building situated correctly in a manner that we felt, would allow us to tell the story and to provide some of these elements that provided for neighborhoods that were friendly for, walking and slow traffic, as well as some of the larger buildings that start to have some more feature and gathering spaces where you're going to see a lot more of a pedestrian interaction at the street level. And again, you can start to see this, you've got this great texture of different types of fenestration different scale, different window looks, all these things that really start to come together and make Annapolis pretty attractive. Now, part of the reason I want to cover some of these too, though, is we've tried to borrow some of the strategies that you'll see in these buildings. You've got really strong horizontal elements. I mentioned the variation in the window patterns and strong connections at the street level. We tried to pick a sampling of buildings too, maybe not just all the ones that are the most revered, but kind of a collection of buildings that are span the ages in terms of when they've been built, but also reflect that overall tapestry of what Annapolis is. Again, you can kind of see this vertical scaling of different heights of buildings, horizontality, material changes, things of that nature that really give a richness to the buildings. So I'll skip ahead. You look at different styles that are in and around the areas. And really an important feature of that too is the materiality you see. There's a great selection of materials, and we wanted to look at what we could borrow and what we could work into our project so that it starts to have that richness that you have in Annapolis proper. Again, I'll note that we weren't trying to copy what was already there, but I think we were trying to find elements that were interesting, elements that were beautiful, elements that could add some character, appropriate character to our buildings in the project.
Okay. So you did this study, you looked at the lines of the structures and the neighborhoods and the materials, and you tried to bring that to the village of Providence Point. Is that a fair statement?
That would be a fair statement.
So if you could move on to the architectural design, the elevations of the village at Providence Point, and describe the features, the height, the facades, the proportion, the mass relationship to the streets, roof forms, all that architect talk, I'll say, and explain to the Planning Commission, how it all came together.
Okay, sure. I do want to start here noting this is the site plan that I believe was submitted for last time from Landscape, but I just wanted to call to attention, you can look at what is nearby. You've got a school, it's a fairly large building, you've got a church across the street, you have some multifamily housing, you have some single family housing, you have the horse farm, you've got a collection of different scale buildings, all within close proximity. And so we took that as a way to look at what options we might have to give different scale and variety to the buildings. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so we can see the site plan that I think Alan had up earlier. But you can kind of see the larger, more massive buildings are more centrally located and also close to Forest Drive. And then as we head to the west, we have all single family cottages to that west on the other side of Crystal Spring Farm Road, excuse me. So I'll note that Forest Drive is here, and we look at a site plan real quick here. Forest Drive is along the top, so we've rotated it slightly. I just want to make note of this footprint because we're going to use this as a diagram to show the relationship of the views we're going to look at here in a moment. So Forest Drive, like I said, is going to be to the top. The main independent living building is here, and then cottages to the west of that. So this is going to be views of the main entry. So if we look down to the bottom right, you can see we've got the diagram of that plan we just looked at. So Forest Drive would be up here, and you can see Crystal Spring Farm Drive bisecting through the middle. And if you're able to see it, we've got two little red carrots that imagine if you were looking at something and you were to hold your arms out like this, that what you see between your arms is what you're looking at. So for these two views, we're looking at the main entry of the building. So that's just off the courtyards that are just off Skippers. This is the first view here. This is the front door with the porte cochere. You can see where we have selected a variety of materials. We have brick, we have siding, we have wood shake, or shake, and we have limited use of some metal panel to give some variety and texture, as well as color variation. You can start to see too where we've got a collection of different types of windows. And we've also tried to do something else that we see a lot as you walk through the city, is the windows tend to give an idea of what's happening behind. So in our building down here at this lowest level, just behind the porte cochere is all common area where you have gathering, you have dining, you have activities within the building. And you can see that they're really open. There's a lot of glass, a lot of opportunity to kind of see in, see out, see what's happening. People kind of coming in and out of those spaces. And then above that, you know, these are the units for residents. We have balconies, and we have different window patterns that kind of reflect what's happening behind it. Is it a bedroom? Is it a living space? And we've taken care to try and articulate that facade, you know, kind of pushing and pulling it to give it some variety in not only its texture and materiality, but as you're kind of walking along the building, it's not a flat wall. It's got a lot of depth. It's got a lot of crenellation. You get some fun things that happen with shadows, but it provides a lot of texture and breaks down the building. I would also like to note that our views have pulled away a lot of the beautiful landscape that you saw last time with Mark Pelusi, so that we could see the building, but would note that this landscape is not truly representative of what is to be done. If anything, we've pulled it back so that you can see the buildings a bit more. And at the bottom here, we have kind of an on-access view of the central green that we have here between the Maison Courts and the main building. And again, you can kind of see that variety in materiality and texture, but also the way we've broken up the roof forms and tried to really make these kind of smaller elements that are part of a larger facade. This is a view we have of some spaces that are along the loop road to the back. I'm going to start with the upper one, and this is kind of an interesting space here. So this is an outdoor space that we're showing, but I would note that this area that everyone you see out there walking on is actually above our parking. We are taking the area above parking and using that for hardscape plaza, as well as green space and green roof, and we are planning to try and get some trees up there as well. So the idea that we are inhabiting the space above parking and allowing for dining and other venues and activity spaces to be able to come out and be part of that outdoor space. So, you know, we're reducing the amount of surface parking we have by doing this, but we're also able to really provide a great outdoor space. And again, you can kind of see the difference in textures and, you know, use types. You know, these are very open windows here. We're really looking at trying to get kind of transparency and visual connectedness. And then up above are the units. And you can see we've got some, you know, smaller windows, much more representative of, you know, private spaces. The view on the bottom, this is also along the loop road. This is our multi-purpose and chapel space. You know, this is a really special feature. This is a gathering space. This is kind of part of the heart of the community where everyone can get together. And so we really wanted it to be special. We're looking at some stone here and pulling in some much more dramatic windows and taller ceilings that are going to allow us to bring light in high and also have kind of a focal point here. This was also one of the views that I think Landscape had shown where we have a pretty significant outdoor space here that this space can spill out onto, and some of the activity spaces you see beyond there to the right can also spill out onto. In the background, and we'll get to that in a minute, you see the skilled nursing building that's also along the loop road, but on the other side of the small parking lot we have back there. You know, again, this is a kind of a feature space and a special element. So we've introduced the tower there. Again, it's something that's kind of a demarcator in the community and something you can see and, you know, represents that gathering. This is the healthcare building. You can see, I'm actually going to start on the lower view this time. So this is that parking lot I was mentioning, and the multi-purpose chapel that we're looking at is just on is going to be just behind us in this view. So At this location, we have the skilled nursing building. A portion of it's 2 stories. The other portion of it's going to be 1 story. We also have a secondary entry back here. In an effort to make this site, this site plan as compact as we could, we've done something that we don't see in most senior living communities we do. Usually the healthcare building is something separate, kind of off to the side. There are some benefits to being disconnected. But in this scenario, we looked at ways to try and connect it to the main building. So if you look at this entry point here, that's not only the entry to the healthcare building, but it's also the entry to the multipurpose, to the Engage Center, which is a kind of a feature that National Lutheran communities have, where they have a lot of their activity spaces, the pool, the activity spaces, the maker room, all those things are focused and come into the building at this secondary entry point down here. So we were able to celebrate it, make it a special element, tie the healthcare building into it. We've borrowed some of the similar detailing that you might see on the front of the building, but we've tried to change it up a little bit. We're trying to make these as elements that are unique in their own right, but at the same time feel like they belong next to one another. We don't want them to be kind of orphans within the community. And the view up on top, you can see, again, we're mixing brick. We've got some shake siding, again, limited use of metal panel, as well as siding. I'm going to jump across Skipper's Lane. We're going to look at these 2 dark buildings here. These are called Maison Courts. These are more independent living, but they are just units. These do not have any of the activity spaces or gathering spaces or common spaces, and are across the street from the main building. So they share a similar massing, and they share, some similar materials, but we've broken down their features a little bit different. These units are different than the ones in the main building, and they're kind of showcased as such. So they have larger balcony elements that we've really tried to highlight here on these buildings and make kind of a special feature, as well as that push and pull of materials, and kind of special brickwork you may see here, where we get a chance to really do some fun detailing with how those might be with, layering up of the brick. In the lower view here, you can kind of see it looks kind of like 2 separate masses. There's one on the left and one on the right, and they're connected by a fairly glassy corridor. And what we're doing here is we have units, like I said, on the left and right, but then we actually have some outdoor space above parking, similar to what we saw on the main independent living building. You can kind of catch a glimpse of that here at this lower view. So I'll articulate the parking and on the back of the building. So down here, this is the face that's closest to Forest Drive. I would note, with the significant trees in that location and the topography, the berming that's happening there, it would not be visible from Forest Drive. But this is the side that faces Forest Drive. But this entire level on the back is building parking. And when we look at the drawing above, you can see this block here, that half of the building is parking. So you drive in under the building and you have parking. But we have captured some green space above that again. So that's kind of private terrace for this building. But we're using that space above parking. Again, it's structured, I think, for both of these buildings up here at the north. I think we have 6 surface spots, and the rest is completely buried underneath the building. But again, you can kind of see some fun games we're playing with roofing materials, cornices, things like that, to kind of break up the massing of these. To provide some visual relief and just, kind of trying to have some fun with it. This is a snapshot that's representative of the cottages. We've got a couple different scenarios. They look similar, but we'll notice that one has brick on the bottom, one doesn't. We're kind of playing with some options of what that would be. But I would note we have 6 different cottage types. And they depend on if they have garage doors on the front or the back. And those were site plan considerations that we had made. But I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Hopefully this works. You can see down here, this is a collection of the different cottages where we're playing different games at the roof level. and also how the porches work. So as you go along either the loop road or down Skippers, you're going to get pretty significant variety of those cottages, trying to pick up elements of dormers, covered porches, you know, and potential brickwork and a chimney element that really speak to the single family cottage nature of these. You know, they're not all going to be the same color. I will note in the bottom view they were actually color removed just to speak to the roofs, and then up above it's shown blue. But we're looking at a color palette that again provides some variety. So those
I'm
are
wondering, excuse me, I'm sorry, this is Diane Butler. I just wanted to talk to my fellow planning commissioners. We have a lot of this information and it's just so well done, and we receive reams of information in our package as well as information that's available online. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Campbell, if you wouldn't mind if we moved it along just a little bit, just because we have public that are waiting to testify as well. And you've done an awesome job. I really appreciate the job you're doing. It's just that there's maybe too much detail for us right now in light of some of the other things we have. But I just want to check in with Ben and our chairperson to see if
I think we're moving along just fine. I'm finding it informative, and I'm forming questions in my own mind.
Okay, keep going. I'm gonna actually grab a drink and I'll come right back. I've got a little bit of a sore throat, so just take your time. If we go to 11 o'clock or midnight, I'm good. Thanks, Bob.
I am getting towards the end. I just wanted to highlight a couple things here that I think we felt was important. So this is a little bit more technical drawing, not as pretty. I apologize for that. But I wanted to note some of the games we're playing and how they're taking advantage of the natural grade of the site, again, in an effort to reduce the disturbance on site. So this is a view looking at the west side of the independent living building. And we see the healthcare building as well. This zone right here would be Skipper's Lane. And this over here would be the Loop Road. And you can see that the front of the main building is a full story up above what's happening at the back of the site. And so that's part of how we are able to bury the parking beneath the building and not have significant blank walls or walls that don't have any activity behind them. And then we're putting the healthcare building down at that same level and allowing it to connect at that parking level. So, you know, again, we're responding to topography that's happening on the site. You can see it here on the east elevation as well. This would be reversed. This would be Skippers and the Loop Road back here. You can see our multi-purpose back here with our tower. And again, we're taking advantage of that grade as an opportunity to slide down underneath the building and underneath it. And then we're laminating the back of that parking with those buildings at the back along the Loop Road. You know, and these are blowups of them. I'll explain just a little bit for anyone who's going to look at these later. On the far right is the key of the building. So it's showing you the outline shape of the building, and then it's fairly faint, but we have some red lines that help indicate basically the portion of the building that you are seeing in that view. So you can see both of these, we're effectively looking into some of the courtyards. And again, that rich landscape that Mark has developed for the project isn't shown in these views, but you can get a sense of, you know, the depth of these portions of the building at the end being out closer to the street. And then the elements that are much lighter and grayed out are what's happening beyond, further back, you know. So this is the main entry of the building, but it's off Skippers a little bit, but it still kind of commands a presence in terms of its massing and the way we've tried to break down the roof forms to really give it some variety and let it read as kind of some vertical elements that are placed next to one another. Let me jump to, sorry, I think my window just closed. Let me open it back up, sorry. And, you know, so technical elevations of the healthcare building. If there's a specific question on kind of these black and white drawings, I can maybe answer that rather than going through each one at a high level. But I mean, these are, what we build the buildings from, but you can start to see the variety in the window shapes and their locations and how we were trying to approach being able to talk about special elements. Here's our secondary entry at the healthcare level, our feature at the multi-purpose. You can see this element of the project, is a very significantly different architecture. Again, they're sharing some elements, but at the same time, they're not trying to copy one another. They want to have a little bit of presence. They want to have the significance of being special, but also being part of the greater community. The bottom one, the bottom view, you can see, we get some great shadow relief with the balconies. They're kind of punched openings, so you get some nice depth. So you're going to get some character, not only in terms of materiality, but again, the changing of planes, and also, the cornice heights that we establish, and where those occur, and allowing those to fluctuate. So we're not having a hard datum that's going along the entire length of the building. And you can see what we've done for the cottages. I've just pulled 2 examples of those, but you can see where we've started to introduce elements that are unique to those cottages. This one has the garage at the front. So this will be along the loop road, again, as an effort to reduce disturbance. And then this cottage here, these are along skippers, or one similar to this. So the garage is in the back, and the front that faces skippers is, purely house with a big porch. Again, kind of encouraging there to be pedestrian movement, access, visual connection to activity on skippers. We've got the bike trail, things like that. So again, we're trying to connect people in a number of different ways. And these are the Maison courts. So you can see again, the variety in roof shapes, and it being a unique building to the site, how it represents itself and starts to speak to some of the feature elements here, kind of that main entry, the glassy connector, and then seeing the back of that glassy connector where it connects to the terrace up on top of the Maison courts. So that would be the tour for now, unless there's specific questions.
Can I ask you I have a quick question about the construction. Are these the larger Mason courts? Are those all stick framed, or are they going to be concrete on the first floor and then stick framed above, or just out of curiosity?
Yeah. So the Maison courts, we are going to introduce a little bit of podium construction. We want that concrete separation from the parking. The front, where it's just apartments, would be 4 stories of stick frame. And then the back half of the building that has 1 level of parking would be, that concrete podium and 3 floors of stick above that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're actually employing a similar strategy on the main building. But we're actually taking concrete up on the first floor as well, above the parking, where we have a lot of the large common spaces, so that we're able to open it up and have larger spans. And then the healthcare building is all non-combustible construction due to its code requirement.
Could you?
So you anticipate the life of these buildings to be 75, 100 years? Kind of thing? Is that the anticipation, or?
I mean, something of this nature, with the amount of structured parking and things like that are included, it's not a short-term investment. And so even if it's wood, I think as long as you get your waterproofing, your roofing, and things like that, you can expect some longevity.
Thanks.
what you started with this contextual study and you pointed out things that over the years, we've seen this many, many times. Architects come in and they say, oh, Annapolis, we love Annapolis. And they show us pictures often of the same things. But those are valid things to look at and valid values to try to continue to communicate. There are several that sort of stuck out from your study to me. One of them is the way things relate to circles. And so I'm going to ask you in a minute to sort of take us through what's around that circle and how any of the buildings on the four sides relate to the circle. I would also, another thing that came out from the study was, it struck me about the buildings that people choose to look at are usually balanced and kind of gracious in their balancedness. And then as I look at the front of the main entrance there and what goes on, I see a fair amount of balancing, but then I look at that front facade and it's got 1, 2, 3 columns of windows and then a fourth column of porches. And it breaks up and unbalances the whole thing. Now, you may have internal needs for those porches, but I'm just pointing that out, okay? Let's give you a chance to respond in a second. Another thing that comes out from the context study is how important window treatments are. And from these, I can't really see if there are, if they're mullions, if they're different sizes, if they're lintels on, I don't know if I'm using the right architectural terms, but lintels on the top or on the bottom. What are the ways that that this begins to look like that, that Annapolis kind of oldish look, even though this is an incredibly modern construction. So I guess those are sort of the 3 things that get to me. The circle, how you're dealing with and creating a senses of that formal balancing, and thirdly, windows.
Okay. Those are good questions. I think I have a site plan here I can jump to that is. So I'm going to use this to talk about the circle. If you want to start there. So here's our circle. It's not as grand as the ones that I think we see deeper in the city, but it is still a viable feature here. And so the relationship to the building starts to become their relationship to the street and the edge. I would note that the dashed line that hopefully you can see in these instances is trees, some of which are existing. So, this corner, we've got the buildings, the cottages kind of as close as we can, get to that condition. But we've got a decent porch there. We've got a front door, we've got a porch on there. Similar with this one, the Maison courts, we had the strong corners of each of those 4 corners that had really strong balconies. So I think there's an opportunity there to look at those as, the building's not necessarily picking up the curve shape. It's not, defining that. It's really kind of responding to, it's a point where you've got bike lane, you have sidewalks, you have bike lanes, you have vehicular traffic, you have, pedestrian traffic that may be over here. So you've got all these things kind of coming together at a point and slowing down and, kind of dancing together. So it becomes an opportunity for people watching in some ways. So the buildings are located in such a way that, again, we have porches on the fronts of all of these. We have strong corners that are really about the balcony elements in those units. And, we have kind of the relationship to the sidewalk and the landscapes that's there.
Yeah. I don't see it gracing the circle. But I'm not going to change anything now. I'm just like pointing out my response. They don't, one of the things about the the circles is that the buildings really mimic the circle. They curve, frankly. And what I see are four, well, especially on one side, one really strong, the independent living building, which is very big. The Maison courts being a little further away and the balconies being so prominent may work. But then on the other side, you've got these sort of poor little cottages here, and they don't look like they're relating to this circle at all. They look like they're huddling away from it.
But does the circle act as a separator?
I don't know if they need to
Basically?
be. I don't know if they need to be protected from the circle by like maybe a 4-foot-high long brick wall that curves along with the sidewalks there, or something that begins to say circularity to, beyond just the circle in the middle. Those are just my observations. You can do with them what you want.
No, I mean that's a fair observation. There's a number of trees that aren't shown there. To your
but
your point, Councilman Pline, we were looking at this as a Crystal Spring Farm Road is existing. We're kind of looking at it as a, hey, can we have something that's a little bit larger on this side, and juxtapose that to the smaller cottages on the other side. We've seen it done in the area. It's useful. But it seemed like it was an opportunity to pick up on something that's been done elsewhere in the city in kind of a similar fashion that worked with how the massing of the site wanted to work here. We had some features on this side that we were really keen to preserve. And so, the larger building on this side really made sense. So that's, kind of became its home.
Okay.
Balance on the front. It's a, I was going to do that again. All right, come on.
It's a tough one. I mean, if you could put balconies on both of those edges, then it would balance. But I don't know what's inside those units.
It is a response to units that are there, and the balcony is specific to that unit. So I would say, the proportion of that bay is the same. You do get kind of equal. They are equal. The fact that it is pushed back and you do get a shadow line there does break that to some degree. But it's maybe not classical in its purest roots. But again, I don't think we were trying to copy. I mean, because I think even you said it. It's, we're borrowing older elements on a modern building in some ways. It's not about necessarily copying, the Pantheon or, any of those, because it wouldn't do them justice. I think, but we were trying to borrow some of that texture, but still use it in a way that works for, okay, if we have units, they want a balcony, because that gives, every resident a chance to have connection with outside, have a place to sit. And we have worked to start to include, lintels and headers, variation in the size of the glass panes, which ones are operable, which ones aren't, where we start to have transoms. And then you start to see that brickwork as well that gives it even a deeper level of reveals, and kind of, almost a picture frame mold around it. So again, we were trying to borrow from those, but it wasn't about necessarily a direct copy of saying, okay, we've seen this window here, we're going to use this one. It was, okay, well, what ideas and what games did they play with the windows to develop that texture? And how do we do it in this context? Especially in a project that is really about units and living. There's not many classical Annapolis buildings that have a lot of units in them. So we were really trying to adapt some of those key features and try and utilize them here.
So the units above the porte cochere are the three windows in the balcony. Is that all one unit or?
Yes.
All one unit.
Yeah. So if we look at this, this is one unit. This is actually one unit.
No, but I mean, the living unit itself, is it one apartment that runs 3 windows and a porch
Yes.
or a balcony?
Yes.
That's one unit.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's too bad because you're really close. I mean, you're really close to having something which is powerfully gracious, and it's like, oh, and I don't know what your internal arrangements are like, and that all determines, what the outward skin is like in some ways. I'm just commenting, sir. You know what I mean? I mean, you're so close.
I appreciate
and I know it's like we've seen this before. You have modern buildings in using traditional kind of elements, and sometimes it can come across as comical, and sometimes it comes across as quite right. Little things, but you've solved a lot of issues here. That's one that glares at me, and the circle kind of glares at me as to how do you make it. How do you give it that something? And maybe 4-foot high brick walls that are curved may make that circle really classy, because this is a classy investment. I mean, this is going to be a classy place. This is going to be one of the most expensive places in the city of Annapolis. This ain't going to be cheap. So you want to make it right. And Bradshaw, they've done a good job. I mean, coming through their commitments to long-term values is evident. Anyway, those are just observations, architectural observations. Thank you for your time. I mean, thank you. Thanks. It's good.
I enjoyed the discussion. Thanks.
Look, it's aesthetics,
It is, but I mean, it's I don't know. It's I wish I had a beverage to go with it, but with the discussion.
Well, see what you can do. Maybe if you rearrange the units inside a little bit. I know you've done a lot of work on this, but maybe you end up with 2 units that meet in the middle and share that front face, and you end up with balconies on both sides. Now, I don't know. I don't know. Like you say, play with it. That's a term that you used a lot.
Yeah, and the night is young. Let's all grab a beverage and chat about it for another hour. I'm up for that. Let's do it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. And as Diane said, we have reams of material, and really we've looked through a lot of it, haven't I? So it's good. I'm glad you took us through it.
Any other questions of the architect? And also, Mr. Hyatt, what do you have after the architects?
I think we might have lost Mr. Hyatt.
Yeah, he's asleep by now.
Yeah, well, it's what happens at commission meetings. Any other questions for the architect by the commissioners before we roll into the next item of presentation?
No, thank you, Mr. Campbell. That was very
And
informative.
if there's any members of the public that are waiting to testify and you're running out of time, please be advised you will be able to testify at the next meeting for sure. We're going to make time for you. We just have to get through these presentations before we can really roll on to public testimony. It takes this long. So if you're a member of the public and you're frustrated with tonight and the timing, you can testify at the next meeting. We will let you for sure. Don't worry. We'll get you in. But anyway, is Mr. Hyde back?
Not yet. I'm not seeing him. I'm looking up.
And when he comes back, I'd like to get his estimate of how much longer he thinks this presentation will be, so that we can let the public know.
Yeah. Who was next?
We may not even have public testimony tonight.
Yeah, well, yeah, we might be able to get a person or 2 in. We'll see, or 3 or 4. Who is next?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. I
Go ahead.
believe next on Mr. Hyatt's list is the traffic consultant. I believe he was going to introduce Ms. Randall. And the city's traffic consultant, Ms. Haas, is going to follow Ms. Randall.
Good.
Let's go for it until 10:30.
Would you like me to go ahead and start with Alan?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. For the record, I'm Nancy Randall. I'm a previous principal with Wells and Associates. I retired in 2019. I'm now their consultant. My office is located in Silver Spring, 1110 Bonifit Road in Silver Spring. I reside in Annapolis in President's Hill and have lived in Annapolis my entire life. I reviewed the traffic study that was done by Ms. Haas. As you know, the city of Annapolis hires a consultant to do a traffic impact study. And I reviewed that study. Oh, I skipped one thing. I know Alan would have asked me to go through the qualifying process. I've been a transportation planner for the last 40 plus years. I've been qualified in Anne Arundel County Circuit Court, U.S. federal courts, and I have been an expert witness through just about every jurisdiction in the state of Maryland and a few locations in Virginia. So we reviewed for the client the traffic impact study that was done by Kristen Haas. That study included 5 intersections along Forest Drive and the proposed Skipper's Lane as it comes out onto Spa Road. We looked at that, we reviewed it. There were a couple of items in it that made that study very conservative. And by conservative, I mean looking at exaggerated numbers is the best way I can describe it. It's probably a poor choice of words, but there was no credit given for the uses that are on the property today that will be removed. There's a 22,000 square foot office building and then 2 homes. One of those homes is actually a business that's run out of the home. So there was no credit for that. So the impact of this project was greater than what will occur. There will be a reduction in volume because of the removal of the businesses that are there and the single family home. In addition, the report assumed 400 and I apologize for looking at my notes, 431 units in this project. But as this project has gone through the process of trying to preserve the trees, they have reduced that down to 350 units. So there was a reduction in the number of units and therefore a reduction in the volume of traffic that would be associated with the project. So the study was based on 431. And again, so the traffic that is anticipated from this project will be less. The results of the analysis indicated that there was a need for road improvements at the intersection of Forest Drive and Spa Road, and also improvement at the intersection of South Cherry and Forest Drive. The improvement at Forest Drive and Spa Road, and unfortunately, Alan was going to bring up the graphic, so I don't have access to it. And I don't know whether you may have that, Tom, but it is to provide for a double left turn lane. We're going to be building a brand new lane on Forest Drive at Spa Road, so that today there are only 2 lanes on the south approach. As you're traveling north on Spa Road at Forest Drive, there are only 2 lanes there. One is a left turn lane and the other is a shared left through, or excuse me, a shared, just have to think about, no, it's a shared through and right. I wish I had my graphic, I apologize. But we're going to be adding an additional lane to that intersection such that there will be 2 left turn lanes and 1 through shared right. Today, if you've ever driven down that road during rush hour, you know that the queue can sometimes be long, particularly in the morning. And the majority of that traffic is making a left-hand turn to get onto Forest Drive to leave Annapolis to go towards places of business, either in Baltimore or Washington. And by producing and providing another left turn lane, we can reduce that queue almost in half. In addition to that improvement at that intersection, we're also going to be upgrading the signal. It will have countdown pedestrian head so that pedestrians can cross the street, crosswalks around the intersection. Right now, there's very limited pedestrian activity there, mostly because it's difficult to cross. Limited crosswalks, poorly marked, worn out over time. So all of that's going to be upgraded with countdown ped heads throughout the intersection. This intersection will also tie into the pedestrian improvements, will also tie into the pedestrian path and bicycle path that are coming around from Forest Drive and continuing south on Spa Road along our side of Spa Road and connecting down toward the school. So that's the basic improvement that's going to happen at that location. In addition, on Spa Road, the road improvement that will occur, oh, thank you. The road improvement that will happen at our site access. So here is the intersection. So you get a general gist of what's out there today. And so the road is going to be widened to provide a third lane outbound on Spa Road so that you can make a left-hand turn onto Forest Drive. And that will happen in 2 lanes instead of the current 1 lane. Then if you go down towards Skipper's Lane, where Skipper's Lane is going to come out onto Spa Road, we're also going to be providing a right turn deceleration lane into Skipper's. And that is so no one on Spa Road will be held up as somebody is going to make a right-hand turn into the property. That'll be a stop controlled intersection whereby somebody who's on Skipper's and wants to make a left or a right coming out onto Spa Road, they must yield to the traffic on Spa Road. The last improvement is just a minor timing change and pavement marking change at the intersection of Forest Drive and South Cherry Grove Road. In addition to that, one of the things that the traffic study did not take into consideration, and that's because through the negotiations of this project, we are going to be extending Skipper's and tying it into properties adjacent to us. It currently is shown on the plan as dead ending at the edge of the property, but that road will be extended through working with the city and the various property owners. That's going to happen in the future, but one of the conditions is that extension of that roadway in terms of my client doing some design work and helping the city make sure that that happens. And what that does is allow for the individuals that are on Spa Road today, the existing homes, as well as the individuals within this community to traverse to get to the commercial development within the Village Green and also over to the Safeway Shopping Center without ever having to get out onto Forest Drive. And similarly, the folks that are in that community behind the Village Green, Newtown, they'll have access as well to get to Spa Road and to get to the commercial activity that's there along Spa Road, as well as the middle school. So it's serving everyone on this south side of Forest Drive in providing a redundant connectivity through there. Then our site access will be a right in, right out only on Forest Drive. It will not allow lefts in or lefts out. And that is pretty much it. We agreed generally with the conclusions of the traffic study, but for the conservative nature of it, but we based all of the road improvements that we're doing and the improvements needed based on that conservative study. We didn't go back in and say revise it to a slower level.
Hello, this is Alan Hyatt. Sorry, I don't know what happened. I lost my internet.
Don't worry, we're proceeding
That's
with.
all right, Alan. I'm finished.
Oh, okay. I swear I paid my bill. I don't know what happened. So,
Uh-oh.
yeah.
That's it. We're doing fine without you.
Yeah.
I
Faster.
hear, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the only thing I don't have, which I would love to be able to show, if you could bring up the exhibit of the improvements at Forest Drive, I think that would be very helpful, and what's happening at the entrance of Skippers and Spa. If you have that one exhibit, that would be great.
Well, I would love to be able to do that, but my internet isn't working.
It's totally down. Well,
I can't
know
connect.
it's in,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I know it's in
It's
their
under
package.
tab 19.
Yeah.
It's
So
up for the
tab
benefit
19.
of the, yep.
This is
Tab
I
19,
can get to it.
exhibit.
My God, you can call it out by tab and exhibit. I don't know whether to applaud you or to say, I'm sorry. God.
Both. Yes.
Oh, geez.
I know. I know. What
We
kind of life
brought
is
up-
this? Right?
We brought up the Google Earth map and pointed out the intersection changes, but we're already pretty familiar. We've already looked and had the documents for some months now. So we know what you're
Right.
talking about. That's why I was able to put it on Google Earth.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Thank
So-
you very much. So I know that if you want to get into the technical details of the study, I think that Kristen is probably the better individual to answer. I will say this, that the study was done in accordance with the city requirements. And additionally, they worked in scoping this, they worked with Anne Arundel County, because as you know, the county maintains Forest Drive. So they had direct input as to the study, what was to be included. We had 18 different developments that have been approved over time that were included in this analysis. So again, it was conservative, but also thorough.
Thank you very much, Ms. Randall.
You're welcome.
All right, commissioners, any questions for the traffic and the modifications thereof? Pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, do you have any idea of how much the Skipper's Lane might reduce traffic on Forest?
No, I don't. We don't have an origin destination to understand exactly how many individuals that are on Spa Road that may frequent those businesses. But if I had to take a guess, I would say, particularly on the weekends, when you do a little bit more shopping, it may be as much as 5 to 10%. During commuting hours, people are going to and from work. So in the evening, coming back into Spa Road, it could be that same amount, stopping off before you go home to the to get gas, or to go shopping at the Safeway, or to pick up takeaway food. There's CVS is there, so it's clearly going to pull traffic, but I can't give you a specific number.
That's a fairly sizable selection of homes in Hunt Meadow that would be using that.
Yep.
As well as to the west over here. All of this
Yes.
area would feed up in there because they're kind of they're locked. They're locked in
Yes.
here. They can't access Forest Drive. So all of this, which is a lot of people, assuming they shop at that supermarket.
Exactly. That's
Which is an
the
assumption.
point. That's the point. I mean, if I live there, I go shopping at the Safeway. It's relatively close. It's easy to get to. So, any one of the grocery stores.
You
from
shop at this
downtown.
Safeway on Forest
Pardon?
Drive? Do you
Yeah.
shop at this Safeway on Forest Drive?
Sure. Yeah.
You use that CVS?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I'm on West Street, right in President's Hill. So, I just come down Spa Road and I'm in.
That's interesting. Yeah, my family and I, we've stopped using the CVS and Safeway over the last summer due to the amount of shootings. We even had a shooting in front of our house on South Cherry Grove. So anyway,
Well,
okay.
that happens
That's
no
a whole
matter
nother,
where
that's,
you
that's,
live.
that's a whole nother conversation, but okay. Any other questions for traffic?
Thank you.
Wonderful.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Kristen Haas of STV. She's the traffic consultant for the city of Annapolis who prepared the traffic study that's in the exhibit.
That's fantastic. And are you running out of oxygen in that small space you're in, Tom? Are you all right?
My little dormer may be small, but it's
working, man. It's working. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
I'll turn it over to Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Haas. I work for STV, and we're the consultant for representing the city of Annapolis for the traffic study. We're located at 7125 Ambassador Boulevard in Baltimore. I do have a couple of slides real quick to share just to summarize. Nancy Randall gave a fantastic overview of what our study encompassed. But let me share my screen quickly. So this was our study area. As Nancy mentioned, it was 5 intersections along Forest Drive, as well as the site driveway on Spa Road. We also, the study was completed in 2018, and it was based on existing traffic counts that were taken in 2017. So it's a few years old at this point. As Nancy also mentioned, we did include 18 different background developments that were approved at the time. These 18 developments were projected to generate over 1,000 trips during both the AM and PM peak periods. So there was significant additional traffic in the background conditions that was approved prior to this site development. In order to project these trips, just as some background information, we use the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, which is our industry standard for generating and projecting traffic trips for a variety of different developments. At the time the study was completed, this was our site plan. As you'll note, and as Nancy noted as well, the connection to Skipper's Lane was not included at the time. And again, we generated site trips based on the ITU trip generation manual that you can see in the table at the bottom here for both the AM and PM peak hours. And that was based on 431 units, which has now been reduced to about 350. This was our summary of the traffic impacts for the study area.
Also, I don't think you're sharing your screen, just so you know.
Oh, am I not? Okay.
No.
Sorry about that. I thought that I was.
Nope.
Okay.
Bottom middle of the Zoom app screen.
And then make sure once you bring up the window you choose, hit share again on that little window that pops out. There you are.
Oh, I see.
There you
Okay.
go.
I apologize. So this was our study area. These are our intersections. These were all of the background developments, and here's a map of where all 18 are. And as you can see, they generate over 1,000 trips during both peak hours. This was our site plan as of 2018. It's now been updated to include the Skipper's Lane connection. And we included 431 units, which has now been reduced. So it would be a reduction in traffic from what was studied previously. And then this is a summary of our traffic impacts at each intersection. Just to give a brief explanation, as this is very technical, traffic engineers grade intersections like a teacher would grade a student on a scale from A to F. A is good, F is bad. Generally speaking, the city of Annapolis requirements are that mitigations are required for any intersection where you are both graded a level of service E or F, and you're worse than the background condition, which means that you're adding traffic that is worsening conditions within the area beyond what was already assumed. So as you can see from this chart, we have existing conditions from the 2017 counts. We have background conditions, which included all of those 18 approved developments. And then the future column on the right here is just the addition of the Village at Providence Point site. I've highlighted the boxes here or the intersections where you would require mitigation or improvements in order to improve traffic conditions. And those are at the South Cherry Grove Avenue intersection and at Forest Drive at Spa Road, excuse me. As Nancy noted as well, these are the improvements that were recommended as part of the study that have been agreed to. And the table at the bottom shows you how the future improvements are improving conditions above to where the background conditions were. So we're improving them to where better than the background conditions had them initially. And that is the summary of the traffic impact statement.
So what you're showing now is what the situation would be with the improvements?
Correct.
So you go from, well, okay.
So under the background includes the 18 developments. And if you reduce delay, that's.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry, I'm reading it wrong. Background is where it is now. Okay, okay. Future
Yes.
improved.
Yes.
Oh.
And that is what's required as part of City of Annapolis's policies and guidelines for traffic impact studies.
So there's slight improvements in these 4 different intersections. Slight improvements in each one. Well, one of them is a little lower.
So there are 2 intersections that require improvements,
Right.
South Cherry Grove and Spa Road. In addition to these capacity improvements, they're also recommending safety improvements, which include the deceleration lane at the site driveway on Spa Road. So for people turning right into the development, there'll be a decel lane there so that cars are not queuing up behind them as they're trying to turn, as well as converting the Crystal Spring Farm Road into a right in, right out.
I think I need to correct Bob. From what I read here, with the future improved, they all get worse. Is that correct?
No. If you start at the top, and the background delay is now 30.6 seconds, right?
Your existing delay 21.9, and then you go future improved delay is 31.1.
The requirements are that you're improved from the background condition. So the background condition includes developments that are outside of Village at Providence Point. So there are other improvements that are taking it to the background condition.
And the numbers are from 2017.
Right.
Okay.
But so you're going from background, not existing, but existing today, and then background is a bunch of other developments happening. It's going to be there. So really, your future is expected to be 30.6, but if you improve it, you get to 31.1, which gives you a half a second improvement. And then an 83 becomes 82, a half a second improvement. 88.6 becomes a 10-second improvement, and then another 2-second improvement. So we're talking negligible to then actually a pretty good one at 10-second improvement. Is that correct, Kristen?
Yes.
And so don't look at existing, look at background for your reference for the public.
Right.
Whereas the public may see existing and say everything gets worse, it actually gets better because the future is the background.
Yes. Well,
Without improvements.
it may be the present because, like I said, the numbers are from 2017.
Yeah, and when were these numbers supposed to be good till? What was
Our future build out year was 2020. And that would have included the background developments that would have been constructed by 2020.
Wow.
And we're 2022. Gotcha. Okay.
Good. Well,
Anyone
thank
else?
you. No, thanks.
Kristen, anything else to add to this?
Nope, I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, based on what you see and have heard in the future improvements, do you think that the future improvements need to change in what their scope is and what they're looking at doing? Or do you think it's still adequate solutions?
My opinion is that they're still adequate solutions, particularly because as Ms. Nancy Randall noted, the study was conservative in the sense that we did not remove trips from the existing site. So there's an existing use on site of an office building and a couple of residential homes. We didn't remove those trips. So that's traffic that in theory is going to be reduced from the overall totals that we were looking at, as well as the development is now smaller. So generally speaking, when we're looking at these improvements were required for the levels of traffic based on this study. And now that those levels are going to be reduced. So you're going to see more improvement than we were even showing in the study.
And I think the biggest thing that you said was the size of the development was reduced. And all these numbers reflect the 400 and something units versus the 300 number.
Correct. The development that we analyzed was 431 units, and that has now been reduced to 350.
So our future improved is pretty out. Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question about the trip generation, because I'm not super familiar with the manual, but does it take, do they take the use into consideration that it's a retirement community?
Yes. So the trip generation manual is based on use, and they have hundreds of uses in there. So the use that we specifically used was a continuing care retirement community.
Oh, okay, so it gets down to that level of detail, so that
yes,
it assumes people aren't commuting, 9 to 5 commuting, and just spreads out their behavior. So
that's correct.
Okay.
Great. Good. It's the clearest, fastest traffic analyses I've ever seen.
I was thinking of saying that, but I didn't want to belabor it. Yeah, Kristen, I like it. It did the KISS, keep it simple, stupid, I like it. I still had a question.
Thank you.
Dave? Cold in the pine forest? We can't hear you. You're better off.
No, I said
right.
I'm fine. There's just a lot to take in here.
There is. It's a ton. Okay, what's next? Thank you, Kristen. If we have anything, we can always come back to you or ask you to come back again. Anything else? Tom, oxygen level?
I think it's back to Mr. Hyatt to introduce his planning consultant, who I think we're all familiar with.
I do have another witness, Mr. Chairman. Are we going to do that next?
Well, it's 10:37. I mean, what would you rather? Would you rather wait and put it at the next meeting? Because it really would be nebulous, I would think, either now or later.
Well, we're going to go to the next meeting, and I don't have an internet connection, unfortunately. So John Harrison is killing me. It is killing me, and so I just soon put Mr. Harrison on first thing next time, assuming we actually go first next trip.
I think that's very fair. You will go first next trip,
Okay.
I believe, unless I'd said something earlier that I'm going back.
Is
on.
Mr. Aronson the last person you're going to have speak?
Yes, he's our last witness, unless we end up with some rebuttal, and I'm not so sure we're going to do that. And then I would just like to have an opportunity to do a short closing argument, and then we'll be done.
So we're looking at another
How long
hour.
do you think Mr. Aronson is going to take?
I'd say 30 minutes.
It depends on how much Alan's going to let me proffer.
Well, what do you think, John? What do you think it would take?
I don't hazard a guess anymore how long things take before the planning commission.
Well, John, no one's going to ask any questions, so.
Okay. Well, we'll make it first on the agenda, and John will take us through it. And look, hour and 15, whatever, and then we get to more public testimony after that. The question.
I'll use the intervening 2 weeks to shorten my presentation.
Great idea.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that will conclude the briefing by the applicant today. However, if we still have some people online, we could take a couple of 3-minute comms, guys. What do you, David? You didn't like that before, and I think we should totally.
I don't like the fact that we keep jumping back and forth with a lot of things, and we should have just done it straightforward. But if we want to do it one more time, that's okay.
Yeah, I just
don't like the structure at all.
Yeah, I just have sympaty for people that have been waiting all this time. But I mean,
yeah, I
get
think we
what
should
you're
have just
saying.
been upfront about. I just think we should have been upfront from the very beginning and just
Said
held
no.
everything to the end. That's
Yeah.
my opinion. But if you want to do it now, that's at this point it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, we got how many do we have, Julian, right now waiting, still on?
We have, it looks, 3 people in the wings.
I'd like to take all three and knock them out. How about it, guys? Commissioners?
Yes.
Let's
I'm
go
good
for
with
it. 3 minutes apiece. Let's go it. Let's go for it. Testimony, public. Thank you for holding on, and make it 3 minutes ish. And please give us what you got.
Actually, hello?
If you
We'll start
can't,
with
if you
Ms.
can't make it
Townsend.
3 minutes, we can have you come the next time, and you can have a little more time, Laura.
At least on behalf of myself and I think my group, I don't like going back and forth because you keep jumping back and forth, and then I hear things afterward from the developers that I'd like to comment on.
Exactly. That's why we normally never do that, but in this time we did it.
So if there's anyone unaffiliated with our group that would like to add their comments now, but I would like to reserve my comments until after the developer has finished his case.
Awesome. Very wise, Ms. Townsend, very wise. That's why you're running your show over there. Thank you. Okay, anybody else who's just on for tonight that won't be able to make it back and wants to make their comment?
We have Ross Garedian. I'm so sorry.
Ross Garedian?
Yes, I was just going to say I would also like.
Oh, so sorry.
The Crab Creek Conservancy, yes. Thank you, Ross.
Mr. Garedian, I'm sorry. I muted you accidentally there. Sorry.
Well, Ross, we will definitely do the same for you then as Ms. Townsend, because we heard you say that you'd like to, and for the Crab Creek Conservancy. Anybody else?
And the last person we have is James Urban.
Well, we all know Jim.
I think that given the hour, I have only a few comments, but I was primarily here to be available for questions regarding the conditions that I helped the applicant and Tom put together. That probably should wait. So I'm fine waiting. I'm good to the next one.
All right, Jim, we really appreciate that, and thank you for your service. All right, well, that's worked out very well. We've recognized all the public testimony people and given them their fair share to make a little comment to postpone to the next time. And thank you for the applicant. We'll put you first on the agenda. We'll continue that item to the next meeting. Thank you, Mr. Hyde. Is there any last minute remark you need to make, Mr. Hyde, before we get you off?
Nope. Thank you, and I apologize for the problem here, for the
No
loss of the
worries.
internet. And I look forward to presenting Mr. Arison and giving you a closing argument and wrapping it up next meeting.
All right.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Tom, closing argument on it? Anything?
Yes,
You said you wanted to.
the city will have one more witness following Mr. Hyde's last witness, and that's Eric Lashinsky, our Chief of Comprehensive Planning. And then I too would like to provide closing remarks.
Great.
You got it. You got it.
Great.
All right. Well, that sounds excellent. That's all I have. And I want to thank the commissioners for the late hour and everyone else. And keep in mind, we did close out 2 major items on this meeting earlier on. So we got 2 off the agenda now, and we can proceed on with this as well as Bay Village Suites in the next meeting. That's all I have. Commissioners?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second that motion. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Please take us offline.